Okie dokie. Good evening from the UK. It's just about to go 5 p.m. here in the UK, so good evening. Uh, for those who are new to the live stream or haven't commented on live stream before, you'll notice that if you want to leave a comment or a question, you have to be subscribed for an hour or longer to send messages. There is no time delay on it. I haven't put slow mode on at all. The reason why I put subscriber only mode on is to keep the idiots away. We've had a spate. Every time I take the subscriber only mode off, basically we get some rather moronic trolling, and I do it to make life easier for my moderators as well. So just so we can have a good debate, a good chat. And I don't expect every question to be a sports question. I have been asked some other questions as well, in regards to my job, my life, my hobbies. Oh, this is a good question from Dan. Now, is London or Manchester the capital of football in the UK? Well, if you look at my history of the Football League, and if you do a bit of geography, the 12 founding members of the Football League originally in the 1880s, and even the Football Alliance as well, which was the rival league set up at the time, I've got to do a video on that, are from the Midlands and the Northwest, which is Manchester, and Lancashire, and some parts of South Yorkshire. So basically, the the origins of the sport that we now know and love today, which you would call soccer, which I would call football, comes from the Midlands, the West Midlands especially, and Lancashire and Yorkshire. So um, similar with rugby league, Manchester, Lancashire, Yorkshire, kind of Cheshire areas where most of the top flight rugby league clubs in the UK come from. So that Midlands sort of north of England kind of demographic. So while London has a lot of professional clubs in all divisions in the game, and a lot of players who currently play professionally and who are in the England setup, a lot of them do come from London, especially South London. Even Gareth Southgate's from South London. I think that's a good question. There's no perfect answer, but the history of the game, the foundations of the rules, the formation of the early professional leagues, so the Football League and the Football Alliance in the 1880s, is in the northwest, which Manchester is the biggest city in the northwest, and obviously Newton Heath, which then became Manchester United in time, as evolved as a club, is from Greater Manchester. Bolton is in Greater Manchester. Blackburn and Burnley are in southern Lancashire. Preston North End is in central Lancashire. Everton is obviously now a district in Liverpool, but actually was a separate settlement at one point, and Liverpool was once originally part of Lancashire. It's now obviously Merseyside. Derby's in the Peak District, which is it's not quite the Midlands, not quite the North. It's sort of that little bit in between. Wolves, West Brom, Aston Villa, all from Birmingham and the West Midlands. Obviously, Birmingham City, which was the Lions club, is also Birmingham. Notts County, Nottinghamshire, which is the East Midlands. Nottingham Forest, which was a Football Alliance club. Nottinghamshire, East Midlands, same city as Notts County. So Staffordshire with Port Vale and things like this, and you talk about some of these historical clubs which I've done videos on. A lot of them are in the north and in a specific area of the north. So I would say I wouldn't say Manchester is the capital of football in the UK. It's part of the hotbed of football. The West Midlands and the Northwest and parts of South Yorkshire, which is east of the Pennines, is where the heartbeat of the sport traditionally is. It's the same with rugby league. I would say more rugby union is more of the southern half of the UK, and London could be called the capital of rugby union. But it's very interesting how our professional sports in the UK have come about, and how they've influenced um, how regions have influenced it, and the history behind like rugby league, for example, that meeting in Huddersfield. So, um, like the rugby football league, when it splits from rugby league, splits from rugby union. Um, uh, that's a meeting in Huddersfield, and I've got to do a video on the foundation of rugby league, and then the split from rugby union, and the reason why we have union and league. which goes back again to a similar time frame to the foundation of the Football League. The Rugby Football League is founded a decade later in the 1890s, and there's a meeting in Huddersfield, which is in Yorkshire, in a very famous hotel, and the rest is history. Yeah, I think the problem with a lot of modern sports fans, especially football fans, is they believe football didn't exist before 1992. A lot of younger fans fail to really understand the cultural impacts and the history of their clubs, not just in England, but in Scotland, in continental Europe. Um, People forget that Borussia Mönchengladbach and Aberdeen were very good sides in European club football in the 70s and 80s, and national champions, and took it to bigger, better known clubs. Um, do I think the West Midlands sports parallel Midwest sports in the US? You could argue that in the Midwest or the flyover states in the US, they've not achieved the level of success such as their East and West Coast cousins, and I think the West Midlands, um, as a region of the UK, has underachieved in a sporting sense. Um, Birmingham City is the last football club to win silverware in English football. Obviously, the Commonwealth Games taking place in Birmingham is a massive, massive thing. And of course, you've got some famous athletes and sports stars. Like Nigel Mansell, for example, is from the West Midlands, F1 driver of great note in the 80s and 90s, a legendary F1 champion. And one of the greatest British drivers who's still alive, and former British F1 drivers. He's from the West Midlands, but generally speaking, the West Midlands has underachieved as a sports area, considering the history of the West Midlands when it comes to especially football and cricket in the UK. And its importance on those two sports, it has underachieved. But having the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham is a massive thing. But yeah, I think you could argue that the West Midlands in the UK is very similar to the Midwest in the US, where they've underachieved in recent decades. Um, you could also argue that certain states in the Midwest are sparsely populated, and so therefore you don't have very big sports markets. I mean, Green Bay is the smallest city with a major league sports franchise. It's the smallest urban area in North America with a major league sports franchise in the Green Bay Packers. So, and while they were a very successful side historically and in more recent times, with their success even predates the Super Bowl, the trophy is named after their former coach, the Lombardi Trophy. They've had Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, two very iconic players in the NFL play for them. Um, but the Minnesota Vikings have failed. The Minnesota Twins have failed. The Minnesota Wild, the Minnesota North Stars got to two Stanley Cup finals, then get moved to Dallas. Then they have the success. So you could argue the Midwest has underachieved in a certain extent. But then, because you argue that Chicago and Detroit are part of the Midwest, yes, and they're two of the very successful NHL franchises in the Blackhawks and the Red Wings. Have had great success. Um, but some of the other professional sides to come out of the Midwest have underachieved. Absolutely. Um, I don't know enough about North American sport to really pass comment, but as an NHL fan, the St. Louis Blues, I think, and the Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings in my lifetime have won Stanley Cup. I would class Colorado and the Colorado Avalanche more as a sort of Western US team. I wouldn't class the Rocky Mountains. You really associate that with the Wild West, the Old West, sort of the Western United States. But that's three major sports NHL franchises that have had a lot of success in my lifetime. And then the St. Louis Blues. There's all these teams that have won their Stanley. I mean, the Detroit and Chicago won Stanley Cups before I was born. But in my lifetime, their most successful periods in the modern era, they win all their Stanley Cups. Um, um, Teams in leagues with salary caps, there's some good Midwest teams. Look, Major League Baseball, you asked the question when I posted the video about Major League Baseball agreeing to the dates, the the teams, the Chicago Cubs, the Lewis and Lewis Cardinals. Firstly, the Cubs and Cardinals. Well, St. Louis and Chicago is a rivalry in any major league in North America. St. Louis is the smaller cousin, the younger cousin, the little cousin compared to Chicago, which is a sports powerhouse in comparison. And there is that rivalry there because they generally play in the same division or the same conference, depending on the league. Um, look at St. Louis and Chicago in the NHL. They're both in the Central Division. They're both Central Division rivals. They've had a lot of Stanley Cup success in recent years. They've been historic rivals for a very, very long time in a variety of sports. And so that's, the Major League Baseball has deliberately chosen the Yankees and the Red Sox, Cubs and the Cardinals, who the next two teams are going to be in the next series in 2024. We'll wait to see. And in 2026, I think they're going across the US. So we could see, two southeastern teams, maybe from like Florida, for example, maybe the Atlanta Braves and the Tampa Bay Rays, for example, could be another set of teams. And then you got Dodgers and all that from Los Angeles, and you could argue that they are deliberately choosing teams for the Major League Baseball London series based on historical rivalry. But the issue with Major League Baseball is there's a luxury tax. So the wealthier teams, like the Chicago Cubs, and to a certain extent the Cardinals, the Yankees, the Red Sox, they can pay the luxury tax, and it doesn't impact the roster they can put together. Whereas, a Baltimore Orioles, for example, maybe, or I don't know, a Miami Marlins, Tampa Bay Rays, more newer expansion teams, less history, less wealthy owners, lower crowd numbers, because it's a very gate-driven league. Ironically, it may have double the revenue than the NHL, but it's a very gate-driven. Can't keep a team together for long enough to have that sustained playoff appearance success, World Series success. Whereas like a team like the Red Sox or the Yankees, which are just powerhouses financially, even if they're not winning, they're just global brands. Now I've got Yankees gear, and I'm not even a baseball fan. I've been wearing New York Yankees merchandise since I was 7-8 years old. I've had Yankees baseball caps, and that's just because it's seen as a fashion statement. When I go out and actually when I'm on holiday, vacation, when I actually take some time off work and I go visit friends, I will see at least 2 or 3 people wearing a Yankees hat who have no interest in baseball. And or not even be that sporty. It's just a fashion symbol. And it's a matter of fact that the Yankees are very good at marketing their branding. And the NY Yankee symbol is it's a brand. It's almost like a fashion statement rather than I'm a baseball fan. I want to wear Yankees gear because I'm a Yankees fan. It's seen as sort of a fashion statement. It's sort of seen as fashionable. If that makes sense. And the Yankees are very good at buying. When they sell all this merchandise, the Yankees make a lot of money. The team can be crap for a decade and they can still make a profit. It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Can't win a first round series, still one of the most profitable teams in the NHL. The Midwest football and basketball has a good history. Major League Baseball, no. Major League Baseball, I think that's the league where the Midwest is weakest. The NHL, I would class Colorado as more, even though it's in the Central Division, more of a Western NHL franchise, just for geographical location, but it's in the Central Division. The Midwest, you got Stanley Cup winners. Detroit technically now plays in the Eastern Conference, but I would class it as a Midwest team historically and geographically. Same with Columbus, ironically. Note Detroit have only made the playoffs twice since they've been in the Eastern Conference and have not got past the first round either. So note that. I would class Detroit as a Midwest team, and a Midwest city. I would class obviously St. Louis and Chicago, St. Paul, Minnesota. The Midwest is an underachiever, but you have to know that a large portions of the Midwest, if you look at the population maps of the US, very sparsely populated when you get outside the big cities like Chicago, like St. Louis, like St. Paul, very sparsely populated. Like states like Wyoming, which you could class as like a rocky mountain state, but also a flyover state, Nebraska, the Dakotas, you can go hundreds of miles without seeing a single person. It's like wilderness. Um, and yeah, the bigger cities are generally smaller as well for metropolitan areas. And then you get into the Rocky Mountains like Colorado and Utah, and you have a strip of population like Denver, Colorado Springs, Salt Lake City, and then there's again wilderness. And then you get into like the desert states like New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and again you'll have spurts of population like Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Vegas, and then nothing, and then nothing, and then you hit California, which is massively overpopulated, and the infrastructure is crumbling. But that's another debate for another day on the other channel. And then suddenly you're on the west coast, which is almost just population going up the west coast, all the way from San Diego to Vancouver. Um, I would have to admit, talking about stadiums, I do want to see. I'm not a massive fan of America, as for a lot of reasons. For visiting, I'd much rather go to Canada, but Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium, even though I'm not a massive baseball fan, the simple fact of the importance to sporting history that they have, yes, I would happily have them on my sporting bucket list of arenas, stadiums that I would like to go to. Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium are pretty much synonymous with American sporting culture. And if you are a sports fan of any nationality, it doesn't matter, you know, what sports you follow, they should be on your bucket list because of the history that they have with the sporting psyche of America. Um, the day that the Fenway Sports Group go, we're going to build a new stadium for the Red Sox, is going to be a moment that would probably send shockwaves through not only the Red Sox fan base, but sports fans across the world going, we've got to see this before it gets redeveloped or demolished. There will come a point where Fenway Park um, needs to either be completely renovated, completely, like torn down and rebuilt, or replaced. Um, there has to come a point. It's a ancient. It's like 100-year-old stadium, and it's like the Estadio San Manes in Bilbao. They built the new one next door because the old one was physically crumbling. It was getting old, and chunks of concrete were coming off. Fantastic stadium that it was. It was called the Cathedral for a reason. They built the new Estadio San Manes right next door. They kept the name, the Estadio San Manes. They just rebuilt it. They built a brand new one. The day that like the new camp or the Bernabeu, they can no longer keep renovating or adding sections and have to completely build a new stadium. Um, yeah, well, we're talking about Barcelona, and there are a lot of issues with Barcelona. I did actually find a little tidbit concerning the De Jong situation and also Barcelona's financial situation, and I did find this. Now, in my opinion, this does actually explain a lot of the problems Barcelona are facing in registering new players and why they haven't. So bear with me. I've got to dig it up. I've got to dig this up. Oh, I've got to find the post now. Right. So there's two things concerning Barcelona at the moment. One is obviously Frankie De Jong's contract. Now, Barcelona alleged this is according to David Ornstein, and David Ornstein is actually a pretty reliable sports journalist in the UK. So listen to this. Barcelona told Frankie de Jong on the 15th of July that they have evidence of criminality around the contract he was given by the old board and the old club president, okay, who was replaced by the current board and president. Cause for legal action versus all, plus cause for legal action versus all involved. They have asked him to invalidate the deal and revert to previous terms involved. That is uh, one thing that's coming out. Now, the other thing I've found, and again, what's the other one I found? The breakdown of the Barcelona situation. Now, this is quite stunning. So again, this is from another journalist. I can't find who posted this, but I put it on a sports group on Facebook. So apparently, Barcelona didn't directly sell their TV rights to Sixth Streets. That's the official name of the company they sold it to. What happened was a third company was set up as a joint investment by Barcelona and Sixth Streets. Sixth Streets invested 517 million euros, while Barcelona invested 150 million euros. And the new company used the 667 million investment to buy 25% of La Liga TV rights for 25 years. The earnings received by this company will go to the Sixth Streets alone. While Barcelona received only 517 million for selling their TV rights, they declared the 667 million as the income received from the deal, which includes the 150 million which they gave to themselves. Let that sink in. So, what about the 150 million which they had to spend? They amortized it over 25 years for the duration of the investment period, and thus the book showed only a spending of 6 million, generating an extra 144 million on top of the actual 517 million they received. This money, of course, doesn't exist. It was merely accounting tricks. Such tricks may or may not be legal. They're not legal, by the way. It's called tax avoidance. But La Liga, nevertheless, has its own rules and regulations and refused to consider this as a proper income for the salary limit calculations. This is why they still can't register their new signing. The cherry on the top is this will be classified as capital gains, which means they will have to pay capital gains tax, which is around 23% in Spain. So Barcelona would end up paying around 34.5 million extra to the government for trying and failing to do an accounting trick, which they didn't even bother checking whether La Liga would allow it or not. And I don't think Laporta got the permission or even informed the socios, the club members, about his investment in the club's part either. So yes, I found that little tidbit. That just sums up a lot of problems. In regards to the De Jong situation, he wants to stay. Barcelona want him to stay, but it's all a bit of a mess. Bearing in mind, Barcelona are also spending a lot of money on revamping a new camp. They want to increase capacity to 100,000. What I find interesting, and I think the signs about Barcelona's financial situation predate the pandemic, and we're going back to even before they sold Neymar. Barcelona, historically, when I was a kid, never had sponsors on their shirts. Ever. When they signed their partnership with UNICEF, you go, you know what, that makes sense. You know, UNICEF, it's a children's charity, it's a non-for-profit organisation, etc., etc. Suddenly, sponsors started like Beko, which is a Turkish electronics manufacturer, mostly of washing machines and dishwashers and fridge freezers, refrigerators. So white goods start appearing. And now Reichtken, or whatever it is, and they start having these sponsors appear on their jerseys. Now, Barcelona always stated that they would never have any sponsorship on their jerseys. They're owned by their members. They don't require sponsorship. They're a global brand, whatever. Their core values. Over the last decade, that's changed. They're now covered sponsors. Then they sell Neymar for $250 million, or a €250 million or pounds, or whatever currency you want to use, because the exchange rate fluctuates. So around 200 to 250 million pounds, about 300 million US dollars. And they sold to PSG. That's back in 2017. Within 3 years, we're in COVID lockdown. And suddenly they're in 1.3 billion in debt and can't afford to pay their players. Barcelona have been in financial problems for a lot longer than they care to admit. And the way that the De Jong situation is playing out is he wants to stay at the club. He's made that clear. The club still owe him backdated wages from basically escrow-style wage cuts. He's not the only player still owed money. There are ex-players who have now left the club via just end of contract free transfer or been sold to other clubs who are also owed outstanding salary payments. Imagine De Jong is their most valued asset right now for salary. He's their highest paid player. And we can all argue, sports stars, some leagues and some sports are well compensated beyond what they should. If they are willing to basically claim his contract is illegal and is not worth the money, you know, it's not worth the paper it's printed on, basically. Toilet paper will be more valuable. If they are willing to do that to one of their star assets, their highest paid employee, imagine what they would do to the cleaning lady and the club shop assistant. If they are willing to screw over and not properly pay their top earner, imagine what they are doing to the lowest earning member of staff on a minimum wage job at the club. Barcelona, something has gone horribly wrong in the culture of this club over the last 10, 20, 30 years in my lifetime. Something's gone horribly wrong from the club that was seen as a model club, owned by its members, no sponsors on the jersey always looks sexy and clean, to suddenly being in astronomical debt and with allegations of basically tax fraud, and some rather creative accounting, which is, illegal, tax fraud and embezzlement, and blackmail and all sorts. Barcelona has gone from a model of how clubs should be run to no, it's not. And the last few club presidents have not come across as particularly desirable individuals. Now, they've had a lot of success in this period. They won a lot of silverware. We all can agree they've been one of the most successful club teams in the last 20 years, last 15, 20 years. Their style of football has changed how the game has been played over the last 15 years. The game has evolved to counteract the tiki-taka, which, guess what, it's quite easily done in both the men's and women's game. It's actually quite easy to counter tiki-taka. Basically, either kick the shit out of them or keep your organisation and be physically fit. You don't have to be an overly skillful team to actually defeat tiki-taka. England proved that in the Women's Euros, and the Men's Euros, Spain didn't win it, so there you go. And in the 2014 World Cup, they completely fell apart. So Spain haven't won anything since the 2012 Euros. So there you go. I don't think they can pay the best lawyers in the world right now. They're 1.3 billion in debt. The fact Fenway is 110 years old. They will not move away from the Fenway location. There's no way. Perhaps a massive renovation, but the stadium is in very good shape. You say that, but Old Trafford has been Man United's home for I think about a century. Biggest club stadium in the UK is not in good shape. Looks great from a distance, close up, it's falling apart. Why isn't there staff taking quite unpaid wages? Right. So the COVID pandemic shut sport down. So in order for football clubs not to furlough staff, a lot of clubs ask their players to take deferred payments, sort of like an escrow style payment. And Dan will understand what escrow is, being a North American. We don't really have escrow in European sport, but in North American sport, escrow is a big part of deferring your wages, basically. So you may not even get paid those wages if you have an escrow agreement with collective bargaining. So the NHL, for example, those NHL players that had to defer salary via escrow may not get paid it in full. That's a problem with the escrow system, and it's a flawed system, and it's overly complicated. I don't fully understand it myself. I'm not a financial expert, but a proportion of your wages is withheld, basically, and you may not get all that money back. So for every dollar you earn, for example, in the NHL, you might pay 20 cents on the dollar into escrow, which I think is basically what happens right now. It adversely affects the lower earners more than the higher earners, because when you factor in taxes and living costs, your take-home pay after expenses and taxes, those on lower level contracts are more harmed by escrow than the top end contracts. So if you're on a league minimum contract in the NHL, escrow is a bastard you don't like. If you are like a Conor McDavid, you don't mind escrow so much because you've got enough of a salary to cushion the blow. But the fact that you don't get all your money back necessarily, you're not guaranteed to get all your money back, is the problem with the escrow system. In regards to taking the quite unpaid wages, when you defer your wages, it's deferred to a later date, and a lot of clubs, some of them decide to take salary cuts and renegotiate their contracts. Birmingham City were the first club in European football to go, you know what, we're going to take a 50% pay cut, and we're going to renegotiate our contracts. Now, Birmingham City, as we know, is run like an absolute shambles, and it's an absolute clown fest at Birmingham City. We know that, but at the time, just over 2 years ago, Birmingham City, the playing squad, the playing staff, the non-playing, they were basically protecting the non-playing staff by doing so. Unanimously, the playing group at the time voted in favour of a 50% salary reduction, not deferral, cut. They actually voted in favour. The PFA at the time were urging their members not to negotiate pay cuts or wage deferrals. The thing is, if you negotiate a wage deferral when times are good again, so now fans are allowed back in, so gate revenues are up again, um, you know, uh, merchandise sales are up again, you can get some of that money back. That's basically what's happened with Barcelona. Now, they've encouraged their playing group at the time, between 2020 and now, to take wage deferrals rather than go, right, we want to cut your salaries in half and we'll renegotiate your contract. Um, when you're next up for a contract renewal, you'll go back to the sort of level of pay you were on. It hasn't worked that way, and unfortunately, Barcelona's got a stupid wage bill that is not sustainable, and COVID exposed that. But the reason why they sold Neymar is to cover some of their financial problems they were having at the time. Losing Messi off their books, while it meant his salary disappears, the loss in merchandise sales is they estimated it was 147 million lost estimate in revenue in merchandise sales lost globally because they lost Messi. Um, um, that's the thing. How do Canadian clubs work in the NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and the MLS? They pay the players in US dollars. So, with the Canadian dollar being weak at the moment, it's more expensive to run a Canadian franchise. When the Canadian dollar is stronger, it's actually ironically more expensive to run a US franchise, but it doesn't really impact the US side of the border. The issue with Canadian teams and what they find is getting free agents to sign because of the tax. It's generally a tax issue. Some states in the US doesn't actually have an income tax. You have a sales tax on goods and services. Income taxes, some states don't even have them, and some counties in some states. It varies on the location and the city ordinance or the county or the state. So places like Florida and Las Vegas, so Nevada. So with the Vegas Golden Knights and the Vegas Raiders, the former Oakland Raiders, so the NFL and NHL in Vegas. Ironically, Arizona is a great place for free agents to sign. Very low taxes in Arizona. The fact that the Arizona teams suck is because they haven't put together good rosters. But if you are a free agent and you want to keep as much of your salary as possible, go to Arizona, go to Florida. Um, yeah, like Rhode Island, yeah, but their population is so small, and they need to encourage as much investment as possible. So putting extra taxes in actually scares off investment. But that's an economic question. But if you're a free agent and you want to go to a location, other than the big name teams like the Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens in Canada, it's harder to attract big name free agents because you got to pay your salaries in US dollars, not Canadian dollars, and you've got higher tax rates in Canada for the most part. That's not universal, but for the most part. And it costs more at the moment with the weaker Canadian dollar to run a major league franchise. So go back to the 90s, you had the Quebec Nordiques and the Winnipeg Jets, the original Jets, relocated because the Canadian economy crashed in the mid 90s, and the Canadian dollar was not worth the money it was printed on, paper it was printed on, really, in comparison to the US dollar. And there was basically a recession in Canada, and financially, the Canadian markets were stuffed. And this is an issue that Winnipeg are going to face if the Canadian dollar continues to be weak against the US dollar. And I'm a massive Jets fan. There is no likelihood in them moving because they're a pretty solid team. They actually are making a profit, not a big profit, but they're profitable right now. They're over capacity basically. They can't sell enough tickets basically. More fans than the capacity of the arena, that kind of thing. But they're finding it hard again to attract those big name free agents. And keep players as well. It's harder for them to keep a team together. Do you think Giroud going to Ottawa as a fan may change, or is just because of being in his hometown? Claude Giroud. He's nearer the end of his career, but it depends on what kind of deal they're offering. Um, Obviously, it hasn't panned out in Philly like he hasn't won the Stanley Cup in Philadelphia. They've come close in Philly, but Philadelphia is basically in the rebuild mode. Ottawa are on the up. They've got a good young team. They need a bit of veteran leadership. He's that veteran leadership the team needs. And yes, he is a local to that part of Ontario, Quebec, because he's obviously a francophone. Um, he's a French Canadian. There's a big French Canadian community in that part of Ontario. Ottawa is a dual language city, it's a bilingual city, and it's right there. There's Quebec. There's Ontario. It's right on that cusp. Do you think they're going? Um, I think it's more to do with the fact that it's his hometown, and he will happily take a hometown discount. He's made his money in Philly, and he's also bounced around the league a little bit, but he's made his money in Philly. He's on the second half of his career now. A good young, promising team with a good young core. Need a bit of veteran leadership. He doesn't have to be the captain. Kachuk's the captain, so he doesn't have to be the captain. He doesn't have to be the leader, but he can be that dressing room leader. He can be that off-ice leader that the young squad need. Um, there you go. The Blue Jays and Raptors might suffer since they're the only Canadian teams. NHL seems to be okay because of the multiple teams. Well, when we had look, the last time there was a major labour stoppage in Major League Baseball, the Montreal Expos were still a team. They're not a team anymore. They were moved to Washington DC shortly after. Um, yes, that could have a knock-on effect for the Blue Jays in Major League Baseball. In regards to the Raptors, they've recently won not that long ago the NBA championship. They're a pretty good team. And Toronto, no team's moving out of Toronto really. They will support anything. The Blue Jays, however, and I will say this, look at the Montreal Expos are a very good team as well at the time of the last lockout. I think it was it was the player strike that wiped out the '94 World Series. Went into '95. The lockout was 1990. So the '94-'95 player strike cost the World Series in '94. Lasted into '95, so it disrupted 2 seasons. And within a couple of years, the Montreal Expos had moved to Washington DC. And a big part of the cause of that, and I've done videos on this, was that player strike, and also the weakening Canadian dollar. And they were a very good side. The Blue Toronto, I can't see any Toronto team ever moving. It's the biggest metropolitan area in Canada, the wealthiest metropolitan area in Canada. It's a metropolitan area of over 5 million people. It's one of the biggest sports markets in North America. They will support anything in Toronto. And the Blue Jays and the Raptors have had some decent teams over the years. They've had some decent success. They've had some brilliant players play for them in both baseball, basketball. Not sports that I'm obviously a massive fan of, but Toronto will support. They will support. Even when the Maple Leafs were shockingly bad in the '80s and the '90s, under the Howard Ballard era of ownership, fans kept turning up to watch a tyre fire. They can't get out in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Fans continue to turn up. So Toronto owners of all the franchises, when they are crap, fans keep turning up. Toronto has this weird obsession with supporting failure, and then the Raptors brought them success. So not that long ago. Toronto, it doesn't matter what the Canadian dollar does. If we're being brutally honest, the Montreal Canadiens aren't moving out of Canada either. That's just unthinkable. However, the other NHL franchises at times in their existence, there's been should we move the team? Now, Calgary is a relocation from Atlanta. Winnipeg is a relocation from Atlanta. So two of the Canadian NHL franchises were once in Atlanta. The Atlanta Flames in the '70s became Calgary, and the Winnipeg Jets were the Atlanta Thrashers. So Atlanta twice has been relocated to Canada, and Winnipeg, its first team, being relocated. There's been concerns Vancouver's safe, but there's been concerns at various points. Edmonton nearly ended up in Saskatchewan at one point. So did St. Louis as well, but that's another story. Edmonton's nearly been moved. The Oilers, the Calgary Flames, they've been relocated once as a franchise. The Winnipeg Jets have been relocated once as a franchise. The Ottawa Senators, with their arena issues, where they play out of Canadian Tire Arena, there's been concerns of them as a franchise. Um, and so the only two NHL franchises where there's been no concerns of either moving the team or the location having a team moved in the past is Toronto and Montreal. The other five NHL franchises in Canada, there has been times where they're like, can the market sustain this? And Winnipeg lost their team in the mid '90s. They get their team back just over a decade ago, but in the mid '90s, get moved to Arizona. They've not been great in Arizona, but that original Jets gone. And so there's this distrust with the NHL and Gary Bettman and the Canadian sports market. There is a massive distrust with the league's governance and the fans. Bear in mind, the NHL is 32 owners and Gary Bettman is their employee, but the fans do not have a lot of trust and faith in the league and Gary Bettman. Gary Bettman is the venting of their frustration. He's the public face of the monolith that is the NHL. There is a lack of trust between Canadian fans and fans of Canadian teams, of which I am one, and the NHL. Some of it is justified, rightly so. Some of it may not be so, but some of it is justified. The Commonwealth Games have finished now, and the last event was the men's hockey final. Australia beat India 7-0 thrashing. That is a thrashing, and India are very, very good at field hockey. Yeah, Australia are very. Australia put a lot of emphasis on the team sports, like netball, like field hockey, like rugby union, that are competed at not only the Commonwealth Games but also with the field hockey and rugby at the Olympics as well. They do put a lot of emphasis. So yeah, they may not have won the women's rugby, but Fiji are pretty good at rugby sevens as well in both men's and women's, and so in New Zealand. So that shouldn't be discounted. But they've also got very good sevens programs, so they're not going to win everything, and they've just happened to peak at the right time. The Blue Jays, I mean, look, yeah, they've had some decent teams, but yeah, Toronto fans will continue to support crap, which is why no Toronto franchise will be moved in any of the major leagues in North America ever. From an outside's perspective, what are your thoughts on two of the best players in the league being on the same team? The team absolutely abysmal. Is that a turn for a new fan? The league being the Major League Baseball tournament, doesn't matter what the league is. Look, as an NHL fan, I've seen the Oilers have some great first round picks, and in my lifetime, well, in the last 15 years, they made the playoffs 3 times. They've got McDavid, they've got Draisaitl, they've had Nugent Hopkins is I think a first overall pick. They've had Taylor Hall. Noah Yakupov was just a disaster. We won't talk about him, but they've had some good first round picks and some first overall picks that have played for them. And Ryan Nugent Hopkins is a solid 2-way forward. And Draisaitl and McDavid are two of the best players, if not the two best players in the league right now for their attacking stats. Defensively, McDavid has a shocking plus minus, but don't worry about that. McDavid lovers would rather notice his defensive deficiencies, which is where Draisaitl is the better player. But is that a turn off for a new fan? Look, the Toronto Maple Leafs have got a stacked forward group. Cannot win a round in the playoffs. The Oilers have got two of the best players, possibly of the modern era, definitely right now in their team. The Buffalo Sabres had, Jack Eichel and Darlene in their team. Can't win anything. And now Eichel's gone. So you can have a superstar player in your team and be crap. It's a team game. If you are playing a team sport, it's a team game. You cannot rely on one or two individuals to carry you. That is not a sustainable model for success. You need to have a good, solid supporting cast of decent players. Um, the fact that the team is abysmal is not going to attract new fans. The fact that they might have the best player or two of the best players, or you know, in the league, may sell you some merchandise, may get you some social media followers. But if the team cannot win, and this is what the Oilers are finding out, is okay. Recently, they've had a couple of playoff runs, but last year getting swept in the first round of the playoffs by a at the time a division rival because of the Canadian division, but a conference rival traditionally, which would be the Jets, getting swept so easily because they just shut down their two best players, Draisaitl and McDavid. They shut them down. They don't have enough scoring depth for me. That was embarrassing. Now they got further in the playoffs this year. That is fine. The Jets went in the playoffs, but getting swept so easily in the first round was embarrassing. Um, and yes, they had a good playoff run this year, which has erased some of those bad memories. They may have learned a lot of lessons from that. But when you are heavily reliant on a handful of players to get you over the line, and the Oilers are, other teams seem to have more scoring depth, more players who are clutch goal scorers or good two-way players. Or it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. You generally have that good supporting cast, which makes a successful team. It makes it easier to sell your product to casual fans that you want to entice to be regulars. You're hardcore. If you're a team and you just sign a big name like PSG, for example, cannot win the Champions League. This is fact, right? Man City cannot win the Champions League. It's fact. They may dominate their domestic leagues. They cannot win the biggest trophy of them all in European club football, but that's another thing. Signing players like a Haaland or a Messi or a Neymar, yay, that's great for merchandise sales. When you come up short consistently in that big competition, so the Champions League in this case, you can have a team of superstars that suck, or you can have a team of hard-working players that play a system, work for each other, will be willing to bleed for each other, and have success. Um, there is no I in team, but there's a me in team, me being part of the team, for example. That's a good mantra to think as a player. Um, but no, it doesn't matter what the league is. The fact it's a baseball reference, I wouldn't know the players you're talking about, by the way, because I'm not a Major League Baseball fan. I don't follow the league. But it's an example you can use in any situation. That Brazil 1970 side was stacked. It wasn't just Pele. The whole bloody squad was stacked. That 1966 England team was just stacked. Class players throughout. The 74 Germany side was not an overly flashy team. The Dutch side was stacked. The Germany team was hard-working players with a couple of superstars. Um, Beckenbauer, Breitner, and Müller are the players that come to mind out of that team because Breitner played in 2 World Cup finals. Beckenbauer won a World Cup and coached a winning World Cup team and coached a losing World Cup final team as well. Franz Beckenbauer, the Kaiser, actually played in several World Cup finals. Won one, lost one, and then coached one, lost, coached one, won. Franz Beckenbauer is a World Cup genius, and Breitner is the first player to score on the winning team and on the losing team as well in World Cup finals. That France team in '98 was not necessarily the most skillful team. The Brazil team was. The Dutch team was. That Argentinian team of Batistuta, Simeone, there was a very young Crespo, I think, in there. The Juan Pablo Veron, Ayala. That was a stacked Argentina team. That was a stacked Dutch team as well. The French team had some great players in it, but they didn't come into their own until 2000 when they win the Euros. They were still developing as a team at the time. I thought you were crazy the first time I heard you thought Draisaitl was better than McDavid after watching them, both of them, for a lot last year. I now agree with you. Yeah, no, Draisaitl's the better player. McDavid is overrated. people fornicate over McDavid, but he may win all these personal accolades, but he cannot defend. And it's a 200-foot game. You cannot get away with it now like you could in the 80s and 90s. It's a 200-foot game. You've got to have a two-way game. That's why Patrick Laine is a bust, in my opinion. He's a one-trick pony, and for like 3 seasons he was good in Winnipeg, and then he decided to play Fortnite all the time and not try. And he was terrible his last season and a bit in Winnipeg, and we traded him to Columbus, and he's been terrible in Columbus. So, and he was second overall draft pick after Austin Matthews. Patrick Laine, I did a video. Is he overrated or underrated? I think underrated. And in his first couple of seasons, he was really good, and he could have won the Rocket Richard. And then the deficiencies in his game was so glaring in 2019, the 2018-2019 season, that watching that first round defeat to St. Louis, I'm thinking to myself, he really is a one-trick pony. This is so obvious that he's so not an NHL player. He's an average NHL player. He's not. He's a solid sniper, but he's got no back check. Whereas other top goal scorers will have a two-way game. But no, people think I'm crazy though. I think Draisaitl's better than McDavid. Changed my mind. No, he is a far better player. He may have had a bad first season, but his body of work since then, he's far more of a complete player than Connor McDavid. That's my personal opinion on it. I think Connor McDavid, when he gets frustrated, he lashes out on the ice. He's had a couple of suspensions. Yeah, McDavid can take on a whole team, and he has some highlight reel goals, and that's fantastic. That is fantastic. It really is, and he is a generational talent. But his game going the other way is hopeless. He cannot play a 200-foot game. He's a one-way player, and that I think harms Edmonton. Is firstly him and Draisaitl, their salaries in the salary cap era really hampers Edmonton's ability to have that scoring depth. Now, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is a solid, I think should get Selke consideration, personally. He's a solid two-way player. And I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins really is the glue in that team. Goes very under the radar. He doesn't have the same amount of goals and assists and points. He never will. That's not his game. He's adapted his game to suit the situation. He has stuck with this team when they really did suck. More than, they were bad before McDavid was drafted. Nugent Hopkins stuck with that team. He could have asked for a trade after his entry level contract. He could have gone, I'm gonna go to the open market. I'm not gonna accept a qualifying offer. I'm gonna go to open market as an unrestricted free agent. He's stuck with that team. He could have been traded away at any time. He, for me, is the player who is the workman. Like, he's the engine room of that team. He's the guy who clearly is the guy in the dressing room off the ice. He's the guy who does all the penalty killing. He can be a first, second, or third line centre. I wouldn't say he's flown under the radar completely. If he was playing in a more brutal, if he was playing in Toronto or Montreal, he couldn't fly under the radar. But he barely has a bad game. He really just has a 200-foot game. He's the ultimate two-way forward. He's a young version of Patrice Bergeron. He should be considered for Selke every year. He does the hard minutes. He does the unglamorous stuff. He does work on power play and the penalty kill. He does play a lot of minutes. He's a minute muncher. It's a good way to describe it. But he's had some good scoring seasons, but he's played on some really bad Oilers teams. And he's stuck with it. He has stuck with this franchise. He could have asked for a trade at any time. He hasn't. He is never complained at any point that the team sucks. He's never shown his frustration with the media like McDavid has. He's just got on with it. And that's what you expect out of a true leader. He keeps his emotions in check. He does not take silly penalties. He's great on the shutdown. If you want to go, okay, the opposition have gained the momentum, you put him out there. And if a player's injured or suspended, he can play second line centre. He can play on the wing, either wing. And there was at one point they had Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and McDavid on the same line, and you're thinking to yourself, this is a disaster because that's your three centres. Because they can all that's your 1, 2, and third line centre all on the same line, which was ridiculous, and that was a massive mistake. In a perfect world, you want McDavid first line centre, Draisaitl second line, and Nugent Hopkins third line centre, and then you've got your centre. And you can roll 3 scoring lines, and the fourth line is just where you put your hard men out, or your shutdown line. And at times, over the last 4 or 5 years, they've had all 3 of them on the same line, and they wonder why they get shut down, and they don't get to the playoffs often, and they don't advance in those playoffs. But Nugent Hopkins will always do a job. You can play him on the right wing, left wing, centre. Christ, I think he's even played defence on the penalty kill or on power play before. The only position he hasn't played is in goal at this point. Going back to Barca, Sky Sports' new video saying they're trying to sign Marcos Alonso and Bernardo Silva. How the hell? They're not even allowed to register them. They haven't even been given clearance to register their new signings. Lewandowski, I think, was the last new signing they were able to register. They owe players wages for this season. They're not. They are clearly there's what they must have something on La Liga. They must have something on UEFA, like the dirty black book of bribery or something, because any other club would be given a transfer embargo, put in administration, given a points deduction, or even thrown out of the league at this point. There is something not right with the Barcelona situation. It's the same as last season when they couldn't even pay their players to start the season and register their players. There is something not right about the Barcelona situation. They have been exposed for some of their dodgy dealings now. There can be no doubt that there is clearly corruption going on at that football club. There is clearly attacks of this shell company that's going to have sold their TV rights. It's like when they used to sell the stadium to the local council or the local government to then be gifted it back the following year for nothing. So when they needed money back in the day, they would sell the stadium to the state government and get gifted it back for nothing. They can't do that anymore. I don't know how they're able to do it. A lot of just people in the football world, doesn't matter if you're a pundit, ex-player, fans. Fans are like, we're not stupid. We're not naive as what we were before the FIFA corruption scandal, or even the Italian. We're not naive anymore. Fans are like, how are they doing this? Is there a shortage of brown paper bags in Catalonia right now? That might explain a few things. There is something not right. There is something so suspicious about this. The fact that the De Jong situation has become farcical. It doesn't matter that Man United are interested or Chelsea are interested, that they've agreed a £65.5 million fee between the two clubs. Now, the player doesn't want to move. That's fine. He can be a bench warmer for a season or go back on loan to Barcelona. It does not matter. The fact they can't even pay him his wages, and now they're claiming that his contract is illegal and they're refusing to pay him any money under that contract, and they have to basically go back to the previous contract that was signed, tells you that there's clearly the previous club president, Bartomeu, basically blackmailed players, had a smear campaign against players. He is booted out and replaced with Laporta. Laporta is clearly trying to anything he does, he's blaming on the previous administration at the club, the previous board, the previous president. They're now trying to claim that De Jong's contract was done illegally. They don't recognise it. They want to. The whole thing stinks. Bearing in mind, this club still hasn't backed out the European Super League idea, even though it would lose in court, and all the other signatories have pulled out, and they're threatening to. They're 1.3 billion euros in debt. Like, if that was a corporate, that was a big, big corporation, a big private company, right? With that much debt, they would either be nationalised under emergency measures if they were like a car company or a bank, which we've seen with the financial crisis and with British Leyland back in the day with the motor industry, and the same in the US with the motor industry with financial aid, or they would collapse. and go into administration. The fact is, Barcelona is a society. It's a different business model than your traditional football club. It's one of 4 clubs in Spain which is owned by the members. So it's a members club basically, where you vote on the club president, the club board, and you know it's a different business model than, let's say, Manchester United or Blackburn or Burnley or whatever the football club may be. Now, what is going on is somehow Barcelona have ended up with the public deficit of Liberia. They've got Liberia's deficit on their bank account, which is a term from Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels. But you've got Liberia's deficit in your pocket when Phil the Greek's got all the money. They, like some of these developing nations, have public debts like this, right? They have calculated, because Messi went to PSG last year, they've lost 147 million euros in lost merchandise sales. Let that sink in. That's lost revenue, right? Obviously, with the pandemic, playing games behind closed doors, that kind of thing, has had an impact on ticket sales. This is a global brand. This is a global brand. Every time you see a news crew going out to Africa or Asia somewhere, let's say there's been like an earthquake or a volcano or a flood, there will always be at the aid station Barcelona shirt. Anytime you see like the Africa Cup of Nations, for example, or anything like that, or a documentary about, I don't know, a geography documentary, a natural history, a history documentary, and they're going into the local village to ask people, like, what was it like in the World War villages, Barcelona, in the third world, the developing world, massive fan base globally. When they do documentaries on the MLS or they're interviewing players and how the MLS got built, they go around the US and Canada, Barcelona, South America, Barcelona because of Messi and some of the other Argentinian and Brazilian players that play for Barcelona, right? They're literally everywhere. It's like the South Sydney Rabbitohs rugby league. There's a Barcelona fan somewhere in every country in the world. Fact, right? And I say, like, South Sydney fans appeared here. There's always a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan. There was a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan in the Stanley Cup final, for fuck's sake. Like, there are certain sports teams where their jerseys just get everywhere, right? Because they actually have global fan bases. Because there's a cult thing. It's Russell Crowe owns the South Sydney Rabbitohs. He's a shareholder in the club, right? Obviously, Russell Crowe, Robin Hood, Gladiator, Master and Commander, massive actor, right? We all love Russell Crowe. He's a part owner of the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Because of Russell Crowe's connection with that sports team, they have fans globally. There's a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan every corner. It's Man United, global fan base. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Liverpool. You're going to see some of these sports teams, rugby league, football, ice hockey. My brother, who I've taken to, I think, 3 ice hockey matches in his entire life, right? He's got an LA Kings, the old GM style, the Gretzky era base hat like this, right? He's not an ice hockey fan. He's got an LA Kings hat from the 90s. How he got hold of it, I don't know. I want to get my hands on it. It's a fantastic logo. I think the LA Kings should go back to the old Chevy style logo, the old GM logo, as I call it. That it's the same with the New York Yankees. I've got New York Yankees stuff, right? Some of these sports teams are brands, and some of them do have that global reach. So Barcelona is one of those global sports teams. The Chicago Bulls in the 90s was a global brand, right? The LA Kings in the late 80s or 90s, because of Wayne Gretzky, exploded in the US, and then it became a global brand. So NWA, Ice Cube, wears that hat. So you see that resonance with the hip hop style culture. Suddenly, the white man's game, which is ice hockey, transcends into the Afro-Caribbean, African American community because of the logo, the fact that the LA Kings, what's this all about? And then you look into Los Angeles, there's a massive fan base in the black population. for the LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks, formerly the Mighty Ducks, because of that connection with Hollywood, with the NWA, a whole host of things. There is like somewhere right now there'll be a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan just pop up somewhere. Same with the Barcelona. Whenever there's anything going on in the world, maybe there's a political meltdown in a country in Central America, Barcelona shirt will turn up, and a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan will be there. So it's just you've got a South Sydney fan and a Barcelona fan. Their jerseys appear everywhere. It seems they just pop up, and these are. It's hard to explain the South Sydney Rabbitohs to a North American who doesn't really follow rugby league, but they are one of the fashionable clubs to follow because of Russell Crowe. They've got some of the best players right now as well in the global game, which is they're a stacked side. They're underachieving this year, but they are a stacked side. But the Barcelona shirts go everywhere. I agree they must have some dirty information on UEFA and La Liga to get away with this much. I don't know how much more they can get away with because La Liga have said you cannot register any new players until you are salary wage compliant. They're over their wage limit basically. So La Liga sort of has a wage limit, sort of like a salary cap, but not quite a salary cap, but a percentage of your income on wages and things like that. And they're over their wage limit, which is set on a scale. The La Liga wage thing is weird. And if they were a lesser side, maybe Rayo Vallecano, which is another Madrid side or Spanish side, or Espanyol, Real Betis have had money problems, Valencia have had money problems. Yes, they would be absolutely buggered. Real Betis have had their money issues in their time. Valencia famously have money issues as well. They're not the only Spanish. Barcelona are not the only Spanish club with money problems. Real Sociedad have gone bust a few times. Deportivo La Coruña have overextended themselves. Celta Vigo have overextended. There are a lot of Spanish clubs that have very precarious finances and have done for quite some time. Barcelona is now finding out what it's like to be a Valencia, to be a Real Betis, to be an Espanyol, to be on the verge of financial meltdown and chaos and bankruptcy. And yes, if it was like a Malaga or a Real Betis, it would be disastrous because it's the global brand of Barcelona. The Spanish FA and La Liga do. It's the same with the Football League with Derby County. Derby County, a founder of that organisation, former Premier League club, former Division One title winner. One of the most historical clubs in English football, was not allowed to fail. They found a solution very, very quickly. Note that. Chelsea, one of the most successful clubs in the last 20 years, not allowed to fail. Now, the difference with Chelsea and Derby County, Barcelona, is the owner sanctions different, but the outcome is exactly the same. Barcelona will not be allowed to fail. New York Patriots, Cowboys, LA Kings, Barca, Real Madrid, even the All Blacks have. Yeah, there are certain sports teams, be it international or club teams, domestic league teams, yes, that you will see jerseys globally. And Barcelona is one of those teams. Same with Real Madrid, and these clubs are both technically bankrupt. Let's be honest, they can't service their debt. They're not even close to servicing their debt, right? And they're global brands like Los Blancos and Barcelona. It is what it is. Do I think they tried to advertise? No, I think it happened by accident, and then they realised the accident was paying off, and then they cashed in on that in the modern era, as I call it. Real Madrid and Barcelona, Liverpool, formerly they were called the Culture Club in the 80s. That was the nickname given to them by the British media. The crazy gang wasn't within the Culture Club, was Liverpool. They basically became global brands by accident with the globalisation of European club football to the North American fan base, really, and eventually the Asian fan base as well. These clubs, by pure accident, became global brands. Ajax, for a while, was a global brand as well in the early. So when satellite TV comes along, these accidental global brands explode. So with the advent of the reformation, well, what was the European Cup becomes the Champions League? Oh, my mullet's getting in the way. When the European Cup becomes the Champions League, the rebranding of that, the satellite TV deal, the Premier League is formed out of the Football League, and the TV deal becomes international. Certain clubs, their brand explodes, and certain players become very high profile. So we had the SAS, Sutton and Shearer at Blackburn. There was a brief period where Blackburn was a very fashionable club to support globally, and there are Blackburn fans all over the world, small in number, but we're all over the world. We exist globally. Smaller international fan base than some, but we became a bit of a brand for a few years in the mid-90s. Newcastle were actually very, very popular in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, because they were challenging for silverware. Didn't quite get over the line, but they were close. And then the Arsene Wenger era, the early era of Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, they suddenly become a global brand. Obviously, Man United and Liverpool become they basically accidentally became global brands, and then they deliberately decided to pursue that commercialization as time went on, as more exposure came to the domestic leagues. They decided to then deliberately, once the accidental globalization happened, they had a good PR and HR departments, and they worked out, hang on a second, we can make a lot of money out of merchandise sales globally, which they did, and they did it very, very well. They branded themselves and marketed themselves internationally exceptionally well. It happened by circumstance initially, and then it became a deliberate corporate exercise, which is where I think football slightly lost its way over recent years. Is with their sort of corporate brand over the footballing brand, and there's several reasons why I think football's lost its way. And I think a few sports are going down this route, and they've sort of lost touch with their origins and their fan bases, and it's becoming a little bit less accessible for fans, and those on lower incomes are being priced out of going to games, which is what it was like on a Saturday. It was your Saturday thing. Working class communities and working and middle class communities en masse would get on the train for the away day, or en masse walk down to the stadium, and every ground would be a sellout. It's not the case anymore necessarily. Fans are feeling priced out. I'm surprised Brady hasn't tried merch like the Jordans one show yet. He is this generation's Michael Jordan. Brady is doing a lot of advertising campaigns. I saw a Tom Brady advert literally on YouTube earlier, and on the NRL feed that I was watching. He's doing a lot of advertising campaigns right now. He's not the only sports star. He's not got his own specific brand. Well, he has his 12 brand, but the Brady brand is not as big outside of the US as I think his advisors would like, and his limited company would basically would want, like Michael Jordan's obviously got the Air Jordans and all that with his agreement with Nike, and he's got his own various companies. The Brady conglomerate, as I'll call it, is not as big outside the US as I think they would like. But he's on a lot of adverts that aren't even related to his brands, and he's been involved in a lot of advertising campaigns for a lot of companies lately. Now, but Michael Jordan has got a good global brand. Now, Brady is a global superstar. A lot of people globally know who Tom Brady is, even if they don't follow the NFL. But his brand, his 12 brand, is Tom Brady 12, whatever it is, not very big outside the US. And in order to crack the global market, if you crack the US, you're pretty much set to make a lot of money. But the second biggest sports market, which is just hardcore, when I say hardcore, I mean passionate fans, ironically, is Europe. Asia will just buy any crap and then make loads of forgeries out of it. But if you can crack the European market, with American trends, you're well on the way to making shed loads more cash. Um, if you can get a trend or a brand or a product to catch on in Europe after the US, you're going to make stupid amounts of money. Because the European consumer, ironically, has more disposable income than the US consumer. Our average salaries are actually technically higher. Um, and ironically, our cost of living, even though we're having a cost of living crisis here in the UK right now and across Europe, ironically, is actually less. Um, so if you can crack the European markets as well with a sports brand, like I'm wearing Fila, which is an Italian company, but um, and I'm wearing American shoe. I'm wearing Nikes, a Nike and Fila. It's a weird mix. I know. I was actually wearing Adidas trainers earlier, Nike shorts, and a Fila top. Couldn't make that one up. But no, it's if you can crack the US market first, the European market shouldn't be a problem. I don't think the Brady brand, the TB12, has cracked. I mean, the Northeast is where he's known from, and Florida, because he played for the Patriots, he played for the Buccaneers. There, the East Coast is where he's going to be advertising the crap out of his stuff. I don't know what his brand's all about. That is a problem. But I've seen him on a lot of other adverts that aren't related to Tom Brady. They're just using him as, well, Tom Brady's doing it. It must be a legitimate. Well, no, this must be a good product. Um, but Tiger Woods has got his own brand, the TW. Roger Federer has got his own brand and his own clothing line. Tiger Woods has got his own golf merchandise line. So certain athletes have done very well away from the sport they participate in, like Tiger Woods, like Roger Federer. Um, Henry Lloyd, ex-tennis player, the Henry Lloyd brand. There are certain Sergio Tacchini. Um, is another one. There are certain sportswear brands or exports who've gone into branding, having their own clothing lines, setting up their own companies, and doing very, very well. Very, very well. And others, it's been an unmitigated failure. Now, Roger Federer does very well with his RF brand, Tiger Woods with his TW brand, in partnership with Nike initially. I think now they are separate companies. And yeah, Roger Federer's stuff is really expensive, really nice though. But Henry Lloyd is another one. Henry Lloyd, we talked a long time ago, but the Henry Lloyd brand is really good stuff. It really is nice. It's expensive, but it's good quality. But it's an interesting one. I mean, the fact that you, as an American who lives in the Northeast, doesn't know what his brand stands for or what the products he is trying to sell, that is a problem, and that's down to his advertising branch of his startup. Um, let's actually see what Tom Brady's brand's all about. It could be a charity, to be fair. It's like the Livestrong Foundation that Lance Armstrong set up. There certain athletes did very well marketing themselves outside of their uh, um, outside of their sporting achievements, and have done very, very well. Um, but I'm trying to find his. All right, let's have a look. What? Right. Okay. So, oh, it's his shorts. It's his little clothing line. Basically, it's a sports. Um, he's got his clothing line, which is TB12, so shorts, tops, and there's also protein shakes. It's TB12 Sports. It's a body coach concept. Um, it, it's crap basically. It's yeah, it's just um, it's a fitness brand basically. Uh, it is like athlete wellness, and you can get training gear, like clothing, a wellness program, that kind of thing. So it's basically like a fitness program, like a dietary fitness program with sports merch. It's basically a sports merchandising program. Um, yeah, you're right. It is athlete wellness, creatine, protein stuff, and then clothing. It's just gym gear basically. It's just your gym setup stuff. Uh, it. I had a quick look. It's yeah. You are right about the athlete wellness, creatine, protein stuff, and the sports merch as well. But the fact it hasn't cracked it over here tells you all you need to know about the product not really being that great. Um, Tom Brady is an internationally known sports star. The fact that they haven't made inroads into the go to the gym, the people who go to the gym. So that kind of someone in their 20s or 30s, 40s, professional people who like to keep physically fit, who go to the gym, hasn't cracked the market over here in Europe. Tells you a lot that that's probably not going to be a good money maker. And the fact that you as an athlete and as someone who lives in the northeast doesn't really know what his product is, considering he's bombarding billboards and TV ads and internet ads all over the US East Coast, tells you that they haven't quite got their sales pitch right and their communication of what they stand for to the wider public. But it's like Fitbit. It's like so there's I feel these fitness gurus. Some of them have done very very well and have actually marketed themselves very well. There's one guy on YouTube, I forget his name, and he came to prominence during lockdown. And his YouTube channel exploded, and he's now making he's written books, he's given interviews, he's a motivational speaker. I forget his name. He's British, and he he basically just came up with these exercise routines for a lot of people who had to work from home or were furloughed. Now, I obviously, in my job, didn't get furloughed and I can't work from home, so I was out and about every day from early hours until sometimes quite late in the evening. And I forget his name. It's oh, it's really going to annoy me. He's British. He's a British YouTuber, fitness fanatic. Oh, it's going to annoy me. But he's a really genuine guy, and to be fair, he already had a YouTube channel. It wasn't doing very well, and suddenly someone found it. It just exploded over lockdown, and he's now a multi-millionaire, and he still does it. Um, but it's all about how you market yourself and how you sell yourself to the masses, and and uh, yeah. But a lot of sports stars have gone into business while they're still active, and sometimes after they retire, and do very very well. And I will say Roger Federer and Tiger Woods, when they do finally go, you know what, I'm calling it a day in professional sport, they're set for life. Because they've got their branding, and Roger Federer, it's tennis gear, it's tennis gear. Tiger Woods, it's golf stuff, so it's golf clothing. And they're going to do very very well out of that. Um, Whereas other athletes and high profile sports stars have had some really serious business failures and haven't done very well out of investing in business. Um, but the fact that you said, yeah, you don't know what his brand stands for, and that's a problem. Yes, that is a problem. That is a marketing fail. Um, Quite frankly, in my opinion. Uh, sort of got topic, but I don't have to answer. But why does it feel like Xavi? I don't know who Xavi Simmons is, and I think lockdown has screwed with people's timelines because it just each day, like for the last 2 years, it's amazing to me that I've lived in this apartment 2 years. I moved into here 2 years ago, this weekend, basically. Well, actually, let me just check my dates quickly. I moved into my flat, which well, I got the keys for my flat. Let me just check my calendar quickly. It's the 8th of August, so 9th, 10th. Yeah, I've been living in my apartment for 2 years this weekend. It's been 2 years since I've and it seems like yesterday. So the last 2.5 years have really just flown by. I don't know who Xavi Simmons is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not, averse with a lot of, you know, YouTubers and TikTokers from I don't follow TikTok at all, but a lot of people who would be household names in the US. Not we have to check who this person is now. It's a fair question, but I think the last 2.5 years have definitely thrown a lot of people um, off. Xavi Simons. You misspelled his Xavi Simons. He's Dutch. Um, he plays for PSV. Um, that's because he's 19. Um, he, well, I don't follow the Dutch league. Xavier Quintin Shea Simons, Dutch professional football player, plays for PSV. It's an interesting one because obviously he broke through at PSG and he didn't play that many games. Um, and though it would probably be your spell check in the US as said, it'd be Simmons. Um, yeah, he's young. He's had a handful of senior appearances. Um, I think it's very interesting that he's come through the PSG youth system and they haven't retained him. And this is a big criticism I have of clubs like Man City and PSG that have got these multi-billion, trillion-dollar owners who are just basically state governments from Qatar and Dubai, and that lack of youth talent coming through, and the fact he's a youth product of both Barcelona and PSG. He's played senior level for PSG 7 games, and then he goes to PSV. Easy much. Um, that's not a good look, I think, for what PSG are trying to achieve. Yes, they're dominating French football with mercenary players. They're not developing, and he's a Dutch talent. He's not a French player. He's a Dutch player. So they're also importing foreign talent into their youth academy. And he's not really a true product of the PSG system, playing for Barcelona. And that's a sad indictment of the state of French football, especially their wealthiest club is not developing its own talent. It buys it in and then sells it on. And there is a real lack um, of success of their youth program. Their youth program is not good enough. Man City, for all the money they've spent as well, not enough talent has come through that youth system, in my opinion. Yes, Foden is obviously a shining example in recent years, but for me, that's still not good enough. Um, Really, honestly, PSG has had a mixed bag. I can't think of many PSG youth players who've gone on to be superstar players. Let that sink in. I can't think of many off the top of my head. Other clubs in France are better at scouting and developing. But Zidane, ironically, started out at Cannes on the south coast, then goes to Bordeaux, then goes to Juventus, then goes to Real Madrid. The rest is history. Not developed by PSG. Didier Deschamps, Marseille. Djibril Cissé, Auxerre. So let that sink in. Some of the big name French players, Eric Cantona, think was a Marseille product as well. Um, a lot of the big name French players that have come through have not come through the PSG system. Um, Arsene Wenger came through the Strasbourg system as a youth talent and as a senior player. So other French clubs are better at developing and scouting and bringing through the young players, and then PSG just stack their team with mercenary players and mercenary youth talent. They sort of sign to youth contracts from and bring into their youth systems from other countries, such as Xavi Simons. He's Dutch, not French. But no, that PSG is PSG obviously has a youth system, and I think is it Pogba? Um, uh, was it Pogba? I think was it Paul Pogba? There's a current French player in the French national team who has come through, or at one point was linked with PSG's youth system. See Paul Pogba. I watched a documentary about Pogba. Um, and he was born near Paris. He wasn't born too far from Paris. Um, no, he came through the Le Havre youth system, where a lot of French players have come through. Rossi, Henri, Torcy. Where's Torcy? Um, that's on the coast. Saint-Martin. Yeah, he didn't. He came through Le Havre's system, and it's the oldest French club in existence, going back to 1872. Le Havre, and a lot of good players have come through Le Havre over the years. Wow, really isn't a good player, is he? You'll be surprised how few goals he's actually scored. So, in 157 appearances and 2 spells at Man United, he scored 29 goals. In 124 games for Juventus, he scored 28 goals. So, he hasn't scored a lot of goals. No, Kingsley Coman. I'm not even sure if he's still there. How did Claire Fontaine get him back? Pogba's parents are Marseille fans. Most French fans are Marseille fans. Biggest fan base in France. Yeah, Kingsley Coman is an interesting one. Again, I can't think of many more, and that is a problem. Their youth system isn't great, and until the Qatari ownership, they weren't a great club. Putting it out there. St Etienne have got as many league titles as PSG. Just putting it out there, and they're not even in the top league at the moment. But French football itself has a massive problem. They haven't got a domestic TV deal. That collapsed during COVID. It's not the most popular sport in France. Rugby union, rugby league are more popular, and are better funded and are more stably run, which is a damning indictment as well. And they've only had one club win the Champions League. Yeah, Kingsley Coman. I mean, look, he's no longer with PSG. He's in a rival league, and that tells you all you need to know about PSG's youth system. Xavi Simons is Dutch, and he's gone back to Holland to play. Kingsley Coman is now playing in Germany. It just tells you all you need to know about the fact that the best youth talent that comes out of France, be it foreign players or French domestic players that's being made with the French system, isn't playing in France. That is that in itself should tell you that there's a problem there. If some of the best French players aren't playing in France right now, that should be enough of a situation and enough of a problem to go, something's not right here. Um, you look at the French national side, and they're scattered all over the European leagues, and very few of them play at PSG. They're thinking there are very few French players playing at PSG, um, and that is another damning indictment of the French league system. Whereas you look at the Spanish squad, you look at the German squad, the Italian squad, the England squad, obviously, and you look at the other big leagues around Europe, and you look at their national sides. So Italy last year, for example, um, Germany, let's say the 2014 World Cup, as an example. England last year at the Euros final. Look at the clubs these players are playing for, and the majority of them are playing domestically, with a sprinkling here or there playing in a foreign league. That's not a bad way to look at it. And the Italian side that won the 2006 World Cup were all domestically based. There is a massive striking difference with the French national side and the other big four, with where their players are based. Most of the German players are based in Germany. Most of the Italian players are based in Italy. Most of the England players are based in England. Most of the Spanish players are based in Spain. Some years and some squads all based domestically. Well, that basically sums up the weakness of the French system. And why South American players generally faster than European? I wouldn't say they're generally faster. I think it's. I think that's not necessarily true. I think the way they play the game is different domestically in South America, but when they come over to Europe, some of that flair and some of their style of play is sort of coached out of them a little bit, or they're encouraged not to to do their tricks and skills or their style of play. The traditional South American style of play is a pragmatic and sometimes all-out attack. Um, as time has gone on, they've got more defensively sound. But if you look at the 1970 Brazil side, defence was not a thing. Not a thing. Didn't know how to defend. And they scored a lot of goals. But you notice with Brazil, until the early 90s, they conceded a lot of goals as well. Yeah, well, the guys do the actual. I mean, the FIFA games are crap anyway. They really are. It's just been the same game rehashed and up graphicked for the last 10 years. They've just been churning out the same shit every 10 years with some updated squads. It's not. I stopped playing FIFA in. I'm gonna say 2013. I last played FIFA, so it's been 9 years since I've played a FIFA game. I haven't missed it, if I'm honest. It's about 20. I think the last time, yeah, 2013 was the last time I properly played a FIFA game. I would say the last time I actually played a FIFA game would be about 2015. Um, the EA Sports, they've really mucked up the FIFA game series, and then now they can't call it, FIFA anymore. They've got to call it EA Sports FC. They've lost the naming rights, and they had that big disagreement with FIFA over how much money, costs and things like that. But no, EA Games, EA Sports, they just hash out the same games year after year with a few tweaks. There's only so many tweaks you can make, and they stopped being enjoyable a long time ago. And yeah, I don't know how well they're going to sell this year with the rebranding and there's been a lot of complaining from the gaming community. It's like the NHL games. I haven't enjoyed them for a very, very long time. I bought a couple of Maddens, NFL Maddens. Just did not enjoy them either. EA Sports has definitely. I don't know how to put it. They've got things wrong. They became very comfortable in their position as the top team sport game brand, and then you've got oh God, what's the pissing Konami, who make Pro Evo Soccer, and then you've got 2K. Their rivals obviously made less money and weren't as successful, should we speak, as when it came to video games of sports franchise video games. EA Sports sort of became a bit complacent, and to be fair, some of in real life, it's not the case. Truly isn't the case. I think it's the style of play that South American teams play. They can slow it down and speed it up. And yes, there are some very, very quick South American players. There's some very, very quick European players. The South American style is a very flexible style. Very, very flexible style of how to play the game. And I do urge you to look at footage of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s of South American football, if you can find it on the internet. Just look at how they are playing the game. It's super annoying in FIFA that you can't play with the old time players. You used to, unless you pay hundreds of dollars in Ultimate Team. Yeah, the microtransactions. Again, that's something I can discuss on the other channel, on the History Boffin. I've discussed microtransact when I've done a few reviews of some of the video games I've played, and my Xbox films are all over there. All my stuff that I've done with video game reviews and stuff, film reviews. I've had this discussion for years. Microtransactions, for me, have ruined video games. Which is why I haven't turned my Xbox or TV on in 2 years. 2 years since I last plugged my Xbox in. Almost to the day. It's been 2 years almost to the day since I last played on my Xbox. And the last game I played was Red Dead Redemption 2. But the last game I played online was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the later release, the new one. And yeah, hated it. I started to begin to hate that game. And because lockdown came in, a lot of my friends were literally stuck at home on furlough. And I would get in from work and they were like, go online. And I'd be like, okay, well, they've got cross platform play on this. And so one of my friends could be on PlayStation, another friend could be on PC, and I'll be on my Xbox. And then I looked in the lobbies and I looked at the crates, and it was all microtransactions. And that just killed video gaming for me. Absolutely killed video gaming for me completely. It's not the hobby, and I've been discussing esports on this channel at times, and that people are saying esports should be classed as sport. And a lot of sports teams, a lot of sports leagues, and a lot of individual athletes have partnered up with esports. Like you got the NASCAR esports, you've got the F1 esports, you've got FIFA esports, where actual teams will partner up with an esports team and play competitions and stuff. They'll do charity matches. That I have no problem with. The problem I have, and I have discussed this, is the microtransactions in video games infuriates me. And it's been heavily criticised for a few years now. The gaming community is pushing back. Why would you want to buy an incomplete? It's like buying a car. BMW now have put microtransactions in to purchasing a car. Get your heated seats and your air conditioning, but you've got to pay a monthly fee. What? It's like if you were to buy a motorcycle or a car and your airbags are optional extras. We haven't installed them, but if you pay an extra 15 quid, it's like when you have your optional extras on a car. But the optional extras you need are important bits like ABS and seatbelts, which are legal. Well, seatbelts are legal requirements. ABS is an optional extra anyway, but seatbelts are a legal requirement in a car. But you buy the car without seatbelts. or you buy the car without a crumple zone or a roll cage if you're a rally driver. You're thinking you're buying an incomplete product. Why would you do that? The video game industry has decided that over the last, I'm going to say 5, 6 years, it's just gone extreme. And then obviously a lot of people were stuck at home during COVID, and it just exploded. Absolutely exploded. People were bored, frustrated, and they wanted something to do. And video games obviously became quite popular. At the same time, there was a shortage of microchips, so they were releasing the new Xbox, PlayStation. Um, yeah, I'm surprised we got onto video game discussion, and it is a discussion for the other channel. But yeah, microtransactions really put me off gaming. And when I moved in here, I didn't put the Xbox in, I didn't put the TV in, and I just haven't had any interest in touching it. I don't miss it. I do not miss it. That's the scary thing, is I don't miss my games console. I don't miss, playing on the Xbox. I just don't. I lost my enjoyment of it. There's no games out right now that scream to me, buy me, play me, because I know the game that I might want to get is going to be laced with bloody microtransactions. The last game I truly enjoyed, because I got Red Dead Redemption back in 2018, but the last game I truly enjoyed, and I do honestly stress this, was the last Gears of War. That was the last game I truly enjoyed playing. Um, and I guess what? Didn't play the online because of the microtransactions. I stopped enjoying GTA because of the online. The online was just a litany of layers of microtransactions, and was very unenjoyable, very frustrating. I did not enjoy it at all. It's one of the greatest games of all time for sales, and it's still making money. And it's on its third console generation, and came out 9 years ago, almost to the day it was first released. Nearly a decade, this game has been on sale. It's still making Rockstar money because enough people are stupid enough to pay for the microtransactions. I just don't get it. I do not understand it. And EA Sports went down the same route with FIFA, NHL, Madden. You know, laced their games with microtransactions, and then they couldn't come to an agreement with actually FIFA about the naming rights. And FIFA were like, you're in breach of contract. We're not gonna allow you to call it FIFA 22 or FIFA 23. So now it's EA Sports FC. Yeah, I like that. I've still got my original PlayStation. I've still got a PS2. I still have some of my PlayStation and PS2 games from the 90s and early 2000s. Haven't played them either for a while. And I do think it is kind of sad in a way that, yeah, I'm 32. I'm not a kid anymore, but I was always told by my dad, always be a bit childish, never fully grow up. I kind of do. I don't miss video games, but at the same time, I have a nostalgia for when you bought a completed game. And if you want to buy an expansion pack, it was a standalone game that you had to install. I yeah. I think certain game publishers like EA Sports have missed a trick with, like, EA Sports used to have Brian Lara cricket, which was fantastic. They used to have every World Cup they would have a rugby union game come out. I haven't done that for a while. Been, I think, 3 World Cups now since they done that. I think the last World Rugby Union game EA Sports made was in 2007. Like 7, 11, yeah, 4 World Cups ago. So they have missed a trick, and they've gone OTT with FIFA, Madden, and to a certain extent the NHL for the North American market. It's not as popular over here, but one of my favourite games is the NHL 2005, the year without a season. So I sort of had my own NHL season when the lockout took place. But they definitely, EA Sports especially, but other sports game publishers as well, have got too comfortable. They got complacent. They got greedy, um, and they got lazy. And 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 while we can all agree that we are the FIFA generation for video games, we are the Madden generation or the NHL generation for video games, and we can all agree that people anywhere between their mid-20s to early 40s, quite frankly, we are the video game generation. Um, and a lot of us may not have enjoyed sport at school playing it, but enjoyed playing it on video games and watch. Were inspired to become fans and to have an interest in the various sports that we enjoy because of video games may have actually helped us with that interest because we may have struggled with sport at school. We may not have been the most sporty or most accomplished athletes at school. May have struggled a little bit with self-confidence. Video games could hide those struggles quite successfully, and was a good escape, a very good escape. And I do agree that NHL 05, the ESPN one. No, that was the 2K one. No, NHL 2005 was the EA Sports. The ESPN one was the NHL 2K, which is the rival title, the unofficial NHL one. So the NHL 2005 was an EA Sports. The NHL 2K5 is the 2K, which is who also have the NBA licensing at the moment, which is the rival hockey one, which was less successful and not as well reviewed. Um, so the NHL 2005 was not the ESPN one. The NHL 2K was the one which had the ESPN backing. Um, and then obviously the TV rights changed after that lockout. There was the next TV rights deal. Then we had the next lockout, collective bargaining, all that. Oh, that's brilliant. I remember going back to the late 90s now, 1999. I had a game called UEFA Striker, which had all the UEFA competitions, but it didn't have the official team names. It just had like Manchester Reds and Celtic Hoops Green and Celtic Blues, and it was basically like Pro Evo, but not Pro Evo. So it wasn't like a FIFA, like EA Sports. It was made by Infograms and Rage. Now Rage was a game studio from Birmingham, and Infograms was a game studio as well that made Rayman originally. And I used to play. I remember having a record win against my sister, 24-0. There you go. And you could create your own team, and then you had This Is Football. You had UEFA Striker, This Is Football, obviously FIFA, Pro Evo. Pro Evo was my favourite. And Konami is the people who make Pro Evo. There's been lots of sports game manufacturers and publishers in the video games world. And this is where, when I talk about the NHL lockouts and the Major League Baseball lockouts and image rights and revenue sharing, when they make these licensing agreements, revenue sharing. So back in the day of trading cards and the sticker books, because that's got a player's likeness, the players want a share of the revenue sharing, and the clubs do as well because their logos are being used. And that goes with the revenue sharing agreements with the Premier League or the Championship or the NHL or Major League Baseball, trading cards, stickers, video games, that kind of thing. And that likeness, and that's actually led to player strikes and lockouts and disputes over revenue sharing in contracts and how, when we talk about the Premier League's revenues, for example, a portion of that is not down to the TV deal. A portion of that is down to image rights, where the Premier League logo and the club logos and the players' likenesses are used for the trading cards and stickers that you can buy in any corner shop in the UK. It's the same with the Serie A in Italy, La Liga in Spain, the Bundesliga in Germany. You go to any like convenience store, corner shop as we would call it, any town or city in Europe, and you will see the Panini sticker books or the trading cards, similar to the hockey cards and baseball trading cards and rookie cards you get in the US and Canada, which are made by O-Pee-Chee. And because it's got the players like this, the league logo, the team logos, that is broken down into league revenues, and the teams get a share of that with their prize money, and obviously the players get at with wages and then merchandise, and there's various contracts in place commercially that they want to get their money. And there's been a big debate about whether the image rights, do the players get a fair share of the money created by these video games, by these trading cards, these sticker albums. I somewhere I've got my 1996 Premier League annual somewhere, which is one of my favourite sports books that I have, and it's a fantastic wealth of information of what the English game was like in the the 96-97 season. It's a fantastic. It's like a journey back in time. Um, I mean, it's annoying that I don't have it here. It's at my mum's, and it's literally 25 years old, but it's a journey back in time. It's fantastic, um, and it's priceless to me. It's probably worth actually a lot of money, but it's priceless to me. And I got it. It was the Premier League. The Premier League came out with an annual every year, sort of like the Hockey News annual and things like that, where it would give you a player, the club profiles, the stadium, um, and and a whole host of other things. Great. I really hate August right now. That means I've got two funerals to go to this month. One tomorrow, one on the 31st. I've got to get my calendar up again. 31st. What day is it? 31st. That's a Wednesday, and I can't get it. Well, I might be able to get it. But I think stickers have a connotation in North America that they're cheaper for kids. Wonder if that's why they don't sell the sticker books. Um, I don't know. Maybe just they're just not as popular as the rookie cards or the trading cards, which can be very valuable. I don't know why that's the case, and why sticker albums are more popular here in Europe and trading cards are more popular in the US and Canada. I couldn't tell you if that's because they just didn't sell very well when they were being sold. Maybe that they didn't market them very well. I would think it's probably because they didn't sell very well. Because trading cards are obviously they last for longer, and if they last forever basically if you look after them. Whereas stickers, as soon as you open that pack and complete the sticker album, that's worth money. But if that gets damaged, that's an interesting one. Um, it is an interesting. I assume it's because they just didn't do very well financially. They just didn't sell very well, and that could be down to marketing and advertising, but also, consumers. Consumer trends are different around the world. So trading cards obviously more popular in the US and Canada. Sticker albums are more popular here, and that's what it is. I mean, at the moment, there's a big boom in buying retro jerseys online. So people are selling their old football jerseys online, and some of the prices they're going for are absolutely ridiculous. Our biggest team in London, that is a tough one. I think Arsenal, Chelsea, and Tottenham have similar size fan bases. Like Crystal Palace have got a big fan base. West Ham obviously have got a big fan base. I think that's a difficult one. I don't think there's a. I don't think I can really say which is the biggest fan base in London or the biggest club in London. Um, I don't know what the difference between UK American sports car popularity wise. To be honest, I think the sports cars are probably less marketed over here and don't have the same cultural significance. Whereas the sticker albums seem to be a little bit more popular over here and over there. Is it worth getting a rail card if you're only traveling by train once a week? If it's a regular thing and it's a constant journey, yes. Get a season ticket, yes, and a rail card. It depends. If you're under 25, you get a discount. If you're disabled, you get a discount. If you're a student, you get a discount. And if it's a regular journey you're making on a regular, frequent basis, yes, it does save you money, a lot of money actually. So yes, it is worth getting a rail card, even if it's only a once a week journey. Having that rail pass, especially if you're a student, you get. I think is it 20 or 30? Is it 20% or 25% discount? I know my mum qualifies for an over 60s rail pass and therefore gets a discount on her train ticket. It is well worth it if you're making a regular um, rail journey. Do it. Um, Arsenal in New York, but I've seen a ton of people wearing Spurs gear lately. Again, it's how Arsenal and it's just how football. It's just how the clubs are marketing themselves to the overseas market. Um, I'm surprised it's not Liverpool or Man United getting the exposure because of their American owners. Um, I think there's some American money in Arsenal. Swansea have American owners. Burnley have American owners. Is it Dundee United have an American owner? There's American money in British football at clubs that aren't Liverpool, Man United. So I am surprised that Spurs are suddenly getting a lot of interest, partly because of the links with Gareth Bale, I'm assuming, and the fact that Gareth Bale's now, gone over to Los Angeles FC. Um, I don't know why that is, and why Spurs merchandise or Tottenham merchandise is suddenly becoming very popular over there. Liverpool, Man United in the whole of the UK. Um, that's a difficult one because I think they've got big global fan bases, but I think you've got 90 other football clubs that play in the top four divisions that might have something else to say about the size of fan base. Um, and uh, hang on one second. But I think because it's a global game and because the American sports market has bought into the English game for the best part of 20 years, you're going to see pretty much every single English football club jersey in the top 92 to 100 clubs, so including the National League, you're going to see. Um, you're probably going to see, yeah, clubs from the Championship, League One, League Two, and the National League, um, simply because of the interest from the American. Um, I wonder if this helped. My brother said he had to pick a London team because, as an American, if he ever goes over there, he'll be going to London over any other city and wants to see his team play on. Um, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. Look, my team's Blackburn. Blackburn are from the north of England. I live in the south of England. The only chance I'm going to get to see Blackburn play this season is when they play away at Reading this season. If Brentford and Fulham were still in the Championship and hadn't got promoted over the last couple of years, then yeah, and Bournemouth, I could have obviously pushed it to do some away days in West London on the South Coast. But as it is, the league my club is in, there's very few other clubs locally that I could go to an away day. So I have Bristol City at a push if I wanted to get the train to Bristol. It's very hard to follow my club. But no, you're going to see in the US, you'll probably see even Championship, League One, and League Two clubs jerseys. I know Swansea have got an American fan base. Burnley have got an American ownership, and there's some. I've heard of Burnley jerseys floating around the US. Because Jermaine Defoe played in Toronto, all the clubs he's played for have got a following in Canada. So that's like West Ham, that's Rangers, that's Spurs. Who else did he play for? That's Bournemouth. So Jermaine Defoe, the clubs he's played for, have got a cult following, like the travelling Yagers, for example, with the mullets and all that. So every team that Jaromir Jagr's played for, they have a guy wear the jersey of said team, and they grow every year. Interesting news for the cup games. Coventry versus Bristol's moved to Burton upon Trent because the pitch being unsafe. That would be the Coventry City, the Coventry Building Society Stadium, otherwise known as the Ricoh. Yes, unless Bristol is the home team, which would be Bristol Rovers or Bristol City. The Ricoh is also used for rugby union, and they probably haven't fully relayed the pitch yet. Because the football season is having to start a few weeks early because of the World Cup, they probably haven't got the pitch ready yet. And they're probably doing a relay, and it hasn't set. So, does Northampton have American fans? Probably. Northampton Town, probably. I would assume every single football club in the top four divisions, plus about half of the National League, because of the amount of ex-Football League clubs in there, probably have an American, at least one American. Look, I found a St Mirren fan in Moscow, for Christ's sake. So even regional Scottish clubs have overseas fan bases. So I wish Southampton used more black instead of white in their colours. No, they've historically been red and white stripes. And my phone is going nuts. People it's that time of day when my phone's going mad. No, Southampton have always played in red and white, as far as I can remember. And their away kit's always been yellow and blue traditionally. Yellow tops, blue shorts. There's a severe lack of red and black team. Red and black at AC Milan. Man City's away kit, Blackburn's away kit, both used to be red and black. I'm trying to think. There is an English club that plays in red and black, I believe. It's not. It's not a very common color combination. Nice play in red and black. Nice and AC Milan, Bournemouth. It's not really a very popular color combination. It never really has been. Why that is, I don't know. Sheffield United is more red and white stripes with black shorts, so there is red and black there. Man United played a red, but well, Man United, Man United alternate between white shorts and black shorts, but it's more the striping on the tops. Um, but yeah, it's kit colours are very interesting, and club colours are very interesting, and yeah, very few clubs play in red and black. Um, yeah, referees did used to wear black. Uh, yeah, that is true. Less referees wear all black now, um, for some reason. Don't ask me why. Um, it's just a thing. I'm trying to think. There are other clubs that play with red and black in their colour scheme. I think Feyenoord is another one. PSV Eindhoven is possibly another one. They've played in black shorts before. AZ Alkmaar is another one that springs to. There's a few Dutch clubs that play with red and black. Oh god, I've got a cough. Phlegma. Um, why do you think Italy wear blue instead of red, green, and white? The Azzurri, all their national teams wear blue. It's I don't know why that is, even though they've got red and green on their national flag, and France have red and blue on their national flag in the tricolours that they have. Because Florence, which is one of the key cities, is purple. Rome is red, but it's that Roman SVQR red, red and goldy orange, like fire red. I don't know why, but the Azzurri, it makes sense. They do it for all. I've got an Italian tank top, football training tank top, and I've got a Italian rugby top from the 2007 World Cup. They've always been the Azzurri. They always have been, always will be. Um, I um, it, I just I don't know why the reason is, but they've traditionally worn blue shirts, white shorts, and I can't see them changing that anytime soon. But yeah, it is what it is. Like, I don't think so. I like the fact that the Italians um, play their home colours in blue, and their away colours occasionally have red and white and green on them. But predominantly are white with maybe a little Italian tricolour on there. But I like the fact that their their home colours are blue. I don't mind it. I think. What do you think about Brentford reusing their kits from last year? I like it. I don't mind it at all. It actually saves the club money as well. Ironically, means they make less merchandise sales, but what do you do? They're a well-run club. Um, they've obviously worked out that there is a cost of living crisis. It's unfair to overly punish the fans with a new kit every 12 months. It wasn't always the case. Sometimes a club would wait 2 or 3 years before releasing a new kit. That's not the case now. That's where I think football has gone too corporate and too much in the kind of business mode, um, and have lost a bit of touch with the footballing side and the fans. Um, so no, occasionally they do get that black and yellow and red. The '94 kit had the national flag on the shoulders. And in ice hockey, they do play in the national colours. Um, the home jersey, the colour jersey, has got the national flag basically on it, and when they're the away team, they still have the national flag colours on their striping on their sleeves. Um, um, But yeah, the Germany's black jersey in the 20. Yeah, I wasn't sold on them personally myself, but that's me growing up watching, the Germany sides of the 90s and the 2000s, and we're talking about the Klinsmann era, we're talking about the Oliver Kahn era, a young Michael Ballack, Miroslav Klose, that kind of. I think we are losing some of those traditional kits a little bit. Um, like the women's Euros, the women England women's away kit was basically the Dutch kit, and the Dutch away kit was basically the England kit. They play that pre-season friendly, and the Dutch are in all white, and the English are in all very orangey red, a really vibrant orangey red, like a fire red orange. And it confused fans and the commentators. They're like, "What?" That was a. They only wore it for the once, and they only wore the socks when they were the away team in the group stage once. They didn't wear the full kit, which I'm so glad. But I think the FA realised this kit's a disaster. It will become a cult classic as a collector's item because it's so hideous. Um, but I think one of the most collectible kits is the 2018 Nigeria and the 94 Nigeria, quite collectible. Um, yeah, New Zealand either they play in black and white. Generally in black, but their football team play in white with black trim, and the All Blacks play with black jerseys with white trim. And again, not their national colours. Their national flag is Union Jack in the corner, blue background, and the Southern Cross in red stars. Which so it's basically a copy of the Australian flag, just with different coloured stars on to represent the Southern Cross constellation. It was on to me. England wear red and white away kit, France wear blue and white, Spain wear yellow. Um, yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I mean, some kits are just iconic. I mean, there are some really hideously ugly jersey designs. So, like the Fisherman Islanders, the fish sticks, terrible jersey. The Burger King LA Kings one didn't last very long. Cult classic. Um, and then you've got the original Kachina for the what was Phoenix, now Arizona Coyotes. At the time, hideous, considered by many. Now they're going for six, seven, $800, 550, £600 for a CCM one of them. Um, the Fiorentina kit from '92. Yes, there are reasons why it goes for a lot of money. Yes, I've also read those same reasons, and I can't repeat them. But there's some pornographic reasons for that, bedroom reasons for that. The Sampdoria kit from the early '90s as well was another one that I want to get my hands on. The there are the Roma kit from the early '90s as well. But some of the kits from the '90s and the '80s, '90s, and 2000s have suddenly become very collectible, and people are selling them. And if they're in really good condition, they're going for several £100s. For what you could buy for like 20 quid second hand on eBay like 3 years ago is add an extra zero. So 20, 30 quid 3, 4 years ago could get you a early '90s Fiorentina, maybe a late '90s Nintendo Fiorentina. They're now going for £300, £400. Um, We call it Captain Birdseye here in the UK. So yes, the fish, fish sticks. Yes. Um, but it's that ugly. It's actually collectible. It's because at the time the Islanders were a badly run team. Like really, like badly run is an understatement. Shockingly, couldn't do anything in the playoffs. The ownership was, well, one of the owners went to prison for fraud. Um, and badly run. They rebranded. It was a disaster. You had Mike Milbury as GM. Garth Snow became GM after him. I'm a goaltender. You're now the GM. What? Um, they were just really bad team at the time. The Di Pietro contract, all that kind of stuff. They let go of Chara and Luongo. Let that sink in. They let go of Chara and Luongo. Let that sink in. And they signed Rick Di Pietro. And he was a good goaltender, don't get me wrong, he had a good goal save, but then he became so injury prone it was ridiculous. Um, and they came up with this rebrand, which was the fisherman jersey with the lighthouse on the secondary logo. Oh dear. Yes, and they traded the Spencer pick as well. And ironically, they got better since they traded Tavares, but let that sink in. They've got further in the playoffs than the Maple Leafs have. Um, but yeah, the Islanders were badly run in the 90s. They did a stupid rebrand. They came up with the fisherman jersey. It lasted a season. It wasn't popular at the time. Guess what? It's ridiculously expensive to get hold of one now. Um, Ridiculously expensive. Now, the reverse retros they did a couple of years ago went down like a lead balloon. Also, the NHL are not renewing the contract with Adidas, Adidas, depending how you pronounce it, post 2024. We are going to have a new jersey manufacturer announced within the next 12 months to replace Adidas for the NHL. They're not renewing their contract. For whatever reason, the NHL and Adidas can't come to an agreement over how much it would cost for the rights. So, I think the hideous kit that I want to get my hands on is the Liverpool away green and white kit they wore in the FA Cup final against Man United in '96. I have the yellow and red, so the yellow with red sponsorship Carlsberg European kit for the following season. But I want to get hold of the '96 away kit, the green and white away kit, which was hideous. I also want to get my hands on the yellow and green Newton Heath anniversary kit that Man United had as their away kit in the 95-96 season. That's worth a lot of money with the black socks, the black shorts, the green and yellow top, the traditional Newton Heath colours. They look like Norwich City, but they're not Norwich City. If that makes sense. I want to get my hands on the away kit for Blackburn, the black and red McEwen's Lager one, because that's really rare as. And the Man City away kit when George Weah was playing for them in 1999. I want to get my hands on that one as well, because that is also rare as. Then you've got the Newquay Brown Newcastle away. Some of the away kits are actually more desirable and more cult classics than the home kits. The old JVC Arsenal, the old Eon X Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon from the mid 90s. The dark bluey purple Wimbledon kit from the mid 90s. That's quite desirable as well. The 1992 Palace kit is quite desirable. The Man City brother kit from the mid 90s is quite a collector's item. There's quite a few. But the Sharp Viacom 96 away kit, the blue one, the blue away kit from the 95-96 season, is quite an iconic kit. The blue and white away alternate third is quite iconic. And there's a rare one with the Shark Viacom sponsorship. I think now Aston Villa's striped one from the mid-90s when they won the league. Was it the league? Yeah, it was the League Cup when Gareth Southgate was playing for them. Rather than their current, claret and blue West Ham style, they had the striped claret and blue. That is iconic. That is a desirable kit I want to get my hands on. There are some really iconic kits from the 90s. It's a shame that they are so expensive right now and they've just shot up in value. And I would say it is because they're so rare. Now, they're fuck ugly, some of these kits, but that's what makes them collectible. Is firstly, they're rare. So the blue and white Man United away kit of 96, 95, 96, hardly anyone bought it. It did not go down well. They did not keep that away kit design for very long. That's when they went to the Shark Viacom grey. That blue and white one, they didn't keep it for very long. I think they only wore it in a handful of matches. That was a very rare one. They look like Birmingham City is the best way they wore that one. I think Arsenal with 02, that was the Invincibles era. The Arsenal JVC kits and the Arsenal Dreamcast kit, I think, is a better kit than the 02 one. That's personal opinion. Unpopular that may be, I personally think the Sega Dreamcast Arsenal kit is the best kit they've ever had. The JVC one, though, is iconic. George Graham, manager, just before Arsene Wenger comes in, and then the Dreamcast kit is when Wenger becomes manager. That crossover period when Bergkamp and Overmars get signed and Anelka gets signed. So before Henry's there, the JVC and then the Dreamcast kits, they are iconic kits. They're cult classics. I'm not an Arsenal fan, but they're ones I want to get my hands on. They're from 90. Well, the JVC started sponsoring Arsenal in the early 90s and carried on that sponsorship until about 1998. And then it became Sega Dreamcast, and then it becomes 02 in about 2003. So when the Invincibles era, 2000, 2003, that's when they go to the 02 kit. So Nicolas Anelka is signed when they are playing in the. I believe they had just signed the Dreamcast sponsorship deal. They might still have been sponsored by JVC. That gold JVC away kit. Ooh, that's a nice kit. The Liverpool away kit in the 2001 FA Cup final, which is very similar to the Arsenal JVC away kit in style. Different sponsors they had, but in style, that is a nice kit. The Southampton kit from 2002, 2003, I think they got the striping right on that. Brilliant colour scheme, but I like their old Sanderson sponsorship from the mid-90s when they were playing at the Dell, the Matt Letizia era. And then we've got rugby league kits like the Canberra Milk Canberra Raiders kit from 1994. I want one of them. They are exceptionally rare right now to get one in good condition online. They've gone back to the Canberra Milk sponsorship, which is fantastic. There's a link to their past from nearly 30 years ago. The Sydney Roosters kit from when they're sponsored by Samsung in 2002 or 2003. That's a fantastic kit. They did a throwback to that this season. That is a fantastic kit from 20 years ago. The Samsung sponsorship, brilliant, and their tricolor colours being reversed. That is a fantastic kit. It was the kit they also wore in the 2003 grand final against Penrith. That Penrith kit as well is very sought after by rugby league collectors. Then you've got the JCT 600 Bradford Bulls kit of the late 90s, early 2000s with the Bradford striping across the white kit with the Bradford striping across the middle. That is a fantastic rugby league kit. The Leslie Varnicolo era, as I call it, before Sam Burgess makes his debut. That's a fantastic kit. That is a classic cult kit, in my opinion. So yeah, I want to get back into collecting sports jerseys, but the cost of them is prohibitive, so prohibitive, which is a massive, massive shame. I've got to actually wear one of my jerseys tomorrow to my mate's funeral because he has requested in his will, and I am stressing this. I'm not joking. We have to wear an ugly football jersey. Now, I've got some NFL jerseys that I think are ugly. I've got some ice hockey jerseys that I think are ugly, but it has to be a football jersey. So I'm going to try and bend the rules and wear one of my NFL jerseys. Maybe one of my rugby union, because rugby football union is what it's the RFU, rugby football. I'm going to try and bend the rules, and he was a rule breaker, so I think he would have seen the funny side in that. Look, he passed away last month. Cancer. It's that horrible disease. Another mate passed away just over a week and a half ago. His funeral's at the end of the month, so I've got 2 funerals this month. Both in the same crematorium as well. I'm going there a lot. Weird. What other jerseys are quite iconic? There are some really iconic. The Tamoil Juventus. That's another one that's quite iconic. Not right now. I mean, we're talking years ago. There's some ugly ones. Rugby league. There's some definite ugly ones. The GB Lions, when they're sponsored by Gillette in 2002, hideous. Adrian Morley's red card one where he sent off after 5 seconds. That Lions jersey, fucking disgusting. Not gonna lie, yeah, I don't like them. I think they're a bit garish, but they are collectible. Yes, the candy one. Yes, yes. And then they go to the Carlsberg sponsorship. I think they were briefly sponsored by Crown Paints for a while as well. The 95, 96 was the last year they were sponsored by Adidas, and they had the 3 Adidas stripes on the shoulder when Stan Collymore was playing for them. And then they go to Reebok for the 96, 97 season, which is when I've got a Liverpool kit from that season. If you have it, you should wear the. Yeah, I don't. That is a very. The 90s was a decade of really, really shockingly ugly goalkeeping kits that were really chronically. I'm going to say whoever designed them was probably on a lot of drugs at the time, psychedelics most likely, and was having a very good trip. But my God, they were psychedelic on the eyes and led to epileptic seizures. They were seizure inducing. They were headache inducing. Yes, David Seaman had some fantastic kits in that Euro '96 tournament. Schmeichel. Yes, I have my 97, 96, 90. Was it 96, 97 European yellow away kit? Was that 97? I got it in 97 for my birthday, so it'd been the 97, 98 season. Garish fluorescent yellow. Red sponsorship across the middle. My dad was a Liverpool fan and was trying to convert me, but I'm a Blackburn fan. It just wasn't. I'd already started collecting sports jerseys as a kid. I had the 94-95 Premier League Blackburn home kit. I had a Brazil 1972 Copa America replica. Rivellino, number 10, not Pele, Rivellino, because Pele had retired at this point. I had my England 98 replica. I had my Liverpool replica. I had the League Cup 2002 Blackburn time Kappa. Oh, it was the skin tight one. That was actually my favourite jersey as well. And I've got my 2006-2007 Lonsdale one, which is I think the worst kit out of the 3 Blackburn kits I've had. So I started collecting sports memorabilia and sports jerseys and sports annuals and posters and trading cards at the age of about 5. And and 27 years later, I'm still um, I'm uh, I'm still collecting sports memorabilia now. Um, Liverpool fans booing the anthem. Well, there's a reason why they're not a very popular fan base with the rest of the country. There's a lot of reasons why Liverpool are not a very popular fan base with the rest of the country. And we can discuss the Hazel disaster and some of their antics um, in Europe in the 80s and into the 90s and 2000s and 2010s with some of their fans' misbehaviour. They don't win themselves a lot of friends. And then you look on social media and they don't cover themselves in glory. But to be honest, it doesn't bother me. But Liverpool's fan base is one of those fan bases you love to hate because there's a proportion of them that bring the club down with their antics and their behaviour. The same with Chelsea. It's a fan base you got to love to hate. It's the same with um, Millwall was another one. But Millwall hate everyone, and everyone hates Millwall. There are certain fan bases that unfortunately have a reputation which they cannot shed the reputation of negativity. And there is a proportion of that fan base that continue to bring, the rest of the fan base down with their actions. Now, whether they boo the anthem or not, I couldn't care less. They're not winning themselves any friends domestically or in Europe. Um, they're not. Liverpool aren't as popular as and then Liverpool has a global fan base and there's a national fan base as well. It's not just the city; it's the fan base is nationwide. And a lot of my family are Liverpool fans, and I feel also fiercely patriotic as well. That's the thing. It is a minority. It's sort of become like Man City booing the UEFA anthem because UEFA and Man City don't agree over financial fair play rules, apparently. And and certain clubs unfortunately don't cover themselves in glory. Um, and uh, it's a complicated situation. There are social issues with the city of Liverpool. There are political circumstances as well. Um, and unfortunately, it is a club with a chip on its shoulder. And there's historical reasons for it. A lot of my family are Liverpool fans because my granddad was from Liverpool. Uh, he was the son of Irish immigrants, so there's an Irish link with us, which again comes down to the national anthem, booing, that kind of thing. It's a bit more complex than just you know than booing the anthem. It's for some reason this year it's become a fashionable thing for Liverpool fans to do. They're a fan base that a lot of the general population loves to hate. They're not winning themselves any popularity contests. But then again, neither are Man United or Chelsea or Millwall or you know a lot of other fan bases as well have an unfortunate reputation, which doesn't help with their standing domestically and abroad. And Newcastle, ironically, is the most troublesome fan base for arrests every league season. Newcastle seems to top the arrest stats. So when there's crowd trouble, Newcastle, ironically, are at the top of the list of number of arrests at games. Millwall was not as high as you think. Millwall is in there, but it's not as high as you think for match day disorder. Newcastle is actually the most arrested fan base in the UK when it comes to disorder in the English game. In Scotland, obviously, Rangers and Celtic seem to top that list. But um, in regards to Man United, did have a lot, and a lot of Man United's arrests were due to online trolling and online hate and online threats. And of course, the Harry Maguire situation last season, where there was that bomb threat, I think there has to come a point where common sense has to prevail. Yes, the player is having a bad season. Yes, the player, it hasn't worked. He hasn't fitted in. The system doesn't. Harry Maguire is not having a happy spell at Man United. Clearly, his previous clubs it's worked. At Man United, it's not working. He's not. He's never settled. He's never played to what we know he's capable of. He's a solid defender. He proved that at Leicester. He proved that at Hull. He's a solid centre back. He's not outstanding. He doesn't have to be. His job is to keep. Unfortunately, at Man United, it's just been a really poor player club relationship. It doesn't work. Um, um, and I have a lot of sympathy for Harry Maguire. I really do. Um, because of that transfer fee paid and the amount of money he's been paid per week, he's got a good agent, by the way, to get him that salary. Um, it's just not working. I don't think he's comfortable wearing the captain's armband, and I don't think he's comfortable in the position that he's been put in by the club. The fact that you know, when did he move there? It was after the 28th. The fact that like he's had what 3 managers or something since he's been there. Mourinho, Solskjaer, Ranić, and now four. He's on his 4th manager. It's his confidence is shot to hell. A lot of players at Man United. I mean, they lost 2-1 to Brighton uh, at the weekend, and they were booed off at half time, and they were booed off at full time. That's going to do nothing for the confidence of the playing group. Um, and I think he just winds his contract out and leaves on a free. I think there's a few players there who want out, but either they just the whole thing's a mess. The club is a mess, and it's not good. Yes, Chelsea are high on the season arrest list. They always make the top 10 um, for fan disorder. Um, yes, Newcastle always rank in the top 3 or 4 and have done for quite some time. They're regularly one of the top clubs for disorder. Are Newcastle United. All right, that's been the case for donkeys. I can't see that changing now. And Eddie Howe has signed a contract extension as well, so he's tied up his long term future with the club. So when people say he wouldn't be there very long, I think the intent is for Eddie Howe to be there a long time, like he was at Bournemouth, and build a club philosophy and a club identity. Liverpool, they come quite high in the disorder list as well. They do. So do Everton as well, which is quite interesting, but not overly surprising. Um, but no, Millwall do get in the top 10, but Newcastle seem to top the list quite regularly. Newcastle are rarely out of the top 4 or 5. Out of all the arrests per season, out of the 92 clubs in the Football League, Newcastle always are consistently at the top. Yes, the Newcastle, because it was a police horse and it was the nearest thing he could swing his fist at. That was against Sunderland in a very heated derby match. I think Sunderland won the game 3-0. I think it was when Paolo Di Canio was manager. That was a good while ago. Newcastle Sunderland is a rivalry of no other. It's one of those rivalries where other rivalries don't come close. The only ones that come close are Blackburn Burnley, West Ham Millwall, and Liverpool Man United. Maybe Villa Birmingham. But Newcastle Sunderland is one of the most heated historical rivalries in the English game. And I'm not sure overseas fans realise how much hatred is in that rivalry. And of course, Blackburn are playing Burnley twice this season in the league, so that's going to be a nightmare for Lancashire Constabulary to deal with. Because they haven't had to deal with it for a while, for about the best part of a decade. But yeah, Blackburn Burnley is going to be a heated rivalry because Blackburn are top of the championship right now and Burnley are fourth. So we're founders of the Football League and we're separated by 12 miles and Accrington. Yes, it is a bloody heated rivalry. Like, I think one match in the 2000-2001 season, I think 430 arrests were made. Yes, it's a heated rivalry. There's no love lost between Blackburn and Burnley. Um, it's a lot of hatred there. Um, a lot of hatred, and it goes back to the 1870s, 1880s. There's a lot of real hatred in that rivalry that goes back to the foundations of the clubs. And when I say hatred, I really mean proper hatred, like intense hatred between the two. And at various points, both clubs have had financial problems. Both have gone up and down the football league. Both have been in the bottom division. Both have been in the top division. Both have, won FA Cups, won the league title, played in Europe. It doesn't matter what league the clubs are in when they do meet. It could be an FA Cup game. It could be a League Cup game. It could be a league game. The hatred is there. And for the first time, the rivalry means something again because Blackburn narrowly missed out on playoffs and Burnley were relegated last year. Now, at the moment, both sides have had solid starts to the season. Both sides are unbeaten to start the season. Burnley have had a draw and a win. Blackburn have had 2 wins. Um, the rivalry is bubbling, and we haven't even played a game yet against each other. We've got to play each other twice this season. Imagine if we're both in the playoffs, and imagine if that was the playoff final. The Metropolitan Police would go, no fans allowed in attendance. Honestly, it is that much hate between the two sides that it's similar on a level to Millwall West Ham. It genuinely is on the same, I think, on the same level as Millwall West Ham. It's just the rivalry hasn't been played regularly, and for lengthy spells, Burnley were in the lower division, and for lengthy spells, Blackburn were in the lower division for very long spells. So make of that what you will. I don't. It, it's hard to describe rivalries until you actually, you know, see the video footage of the hatred in the stands and actually experience it, um, like watching a game. Um, like I saw a Brentford Fulham match, and that's one of the more gentle West London rivalries or London rivalries. And that was a match full of hate. Like the fans were when I say fans, they were animals basically trying to go for each other. Um, I've been going to football since I was 16 years old, and I've seen I've yeah I've seen the hatred. Um, um, Liverpool versus Everton, Man United versus Man City rivalry. Where does it rank? Not as highly. Not as highly because break out the 72 Brazil jersey. No, I have not seen. It's actually at my mum's. It's at my mum's in storage because it's actually youth size and I don't fit in it anymore, and I would rather not get my head stuck in the neck. Um, it's a skin tight youth size. I would love to get it out, but it's in storage. It's in a safe space, and I'm I might get it framed. I might get it framed. But it's not in. It's not with me right now. It's 6 miles up the road at my mum's house. In storage. Alongside my Liverpool kit and one of my Blackburn kits. It's in storage. It's in a safe space. Um, and that's where it shall remain. I might get it out at some point, yeah, but I've got to help my mum sort through a lot of stuff, including some of my things, and that includes some of my early sports memorabilia that I've got. But I would love to have that kit right now for tomorrow, but unfortunately I don't. But yes, it's my Rivellino 1972 one. It's a fantastic, fantastic kit. It is one of my favourites, and it's an iconic kit from the 70s. If I was to actually get the proper kit from the 70s, that we're talking nearly £1,000. They've really rocketed in value, anywhere between 300 to £1,000. Yeah, that's a month's wages nearly. I'm not paying two-thirds of a month's wage for a football top, not even close. Out of these three clubs, which is most likely Mourinho would go to, I would probably say Arsenal because I can't see Mourinho fitting in with the Liverpool style. I can't see Mourinho fitting in with. If I'm being brutally honest, I don't think Mourinho's style suits any of those clubs. But he has a connection with London. He's coached two. Well, actually, no, I wouldn't even say Arsenal because he's coached Tottenham. That's a tough one. Uh, but the thing is, he has a connection with London. He still owns property in London. But because he's coached Tottenham, I'm not sure how receptive the Arsenal fans would be to Mourinho. But then again, he was an assistant coach at Barcelona and has coached Real Madrid. So, who am I to judge? But I think it's a difficult one because he doesn't suit the philosophy of those three clubs. No, I wouldn't have Paul Pogba. His goals to game ratio is ridiculously low. He doesn't score enough, and he's too lazy. He has no two-way game. His attitude sucks. He may train really well or have great skill. His attitude and application is not there. He spends more time on Instagram than focusing on what he's paid to do. He's petulant. He's arrogant. His ego is the size of Old Trafford. Um, his consistency is that of a newt. Um, I wouldn't have Pogba. Wouldn't have Pogba. Even many hardcore Juventus fans go, he may be exceptionally skilled, but he's exceptionally lazy. His attitude stinks. He comes across as an entitled, privileged, pampered prat. Unfortunately, he doesn't come across as a serious professional. His professionalism is lacking. His attitude and ego are out of kilter, and he needs to become a bit more humble. Um, so unfortunately, he's allowed his status to go to his head. Lukaku, yeah, I'm not sold on Lukaku. He seems to perform well for Belgium, but in recent years, he's very hit and miss. He's very inconsistent, um, and that is a problem. Um, Lukaku in the early days, yes. Now, no. Uh, Lukaku for Belgium, if he can translate that to consistent club form, then yes. He's too inconsistent, and that is a problem. Massive problem. His consistency. Both those players are not consistent enough. At least with Lukaku, you know he is a professional. He's trying, and you know with Lukaku he is committed to the cause. It's just, does he suit the system he was being asked to play at Chelsea? The answer is probably not. Um, it obviously works better at Inter Milan with the system they play. Absolutely. And the ironic thing is, the Italian league is more defensively minded than the English league. So let that sink in. It didn't work at Chelsea in his return spell. There's a number of reasons for that. I don't think he had a good relationship with Thomas Tuchel, who's a known prickly character at the best of times. But getting that consistency and keeping him fit and getting regular minutes out of him. Pogba at Man United. At least Lukaku, he very quickly he realised this is not working. I want to leave, and they offloaded him on loan. So it's a win-win for both sides. It didn't work out. And very early on, he was like, "This isn't working for me with the style of play we're now playing. It's just not working." Um, and I think Tuchel realised, okay, this isn't working as well as we hoped, but we'll see if we can fix it. Pogba at Man United just became a distraction. Lukaku, it was just not working. He was trying. That's the difference. You could see the effort was there, but it just wasn't working. It wasn't a good fit. The style of play wasn't suiting, him as a striker. The build-up play, the link-in play, the system. Whereas Pogba, it's just attitude, application, arrogance, entitlement, pampered, privileged prick. Who we better signing? Lukaku at Inter. Lukaku at Inter. He's obviously happy. He has a good relationship with the club. Um, the club has a good relationship with him. That's my upstairs neighbour's washing machine is causing that vibration. So my light vibrates, so I can't turn it on when they got the washing machine on. Otherwise, the bulb will start flickering violently. So, there you go. I think Lukaku will be a better at Inter than Pogba at Juventus. There's a reason why Juventus sold Pogba. There's also a reason why Man United have sold him to Juventus twice. He's just doing the yo-yo between the two clubs. We may see a bounce back from Pogba, but if you look at his numbers, his goals per game ratio isn't much better at Juventus than it is at Man United. He's played like a handful less games at Juventus, but his goals per game ratio isn't much better. It's about the same. The difference being he was in a winning team at Juventus then. They're not a winning team now, so the same problems could persist now that were at Man United in recent seasons. Juventus team has stopped winning, and they're in a similar position on the decline like Man United are now. So we could see the same situation with Pogba at Juventus that we've just seen at Man United. When he first left Man United was still winning. Juventus was still winning in his first spell. That's not the case for these two clubs now. They're in their rebuild phase. So we may have the same situation with Pogba at Juventus that we've just had at Man United for the last 3-4 years. And I'm being deadly serious. Because the winning has stopped. And Juventus are now doing what Man United did. Why did Chelsea fans think Lukaku worked the third time after not working the first two? Third's the charm. It sort of worked the first time. The second time, yeah. The third time, definitely not. I do think Lukaku's got issues with his weight. I think he's carrying a bit too much. He's a little bit on the heavy side. If he was to lose 10 pounds, a stone, if he was to trim down a little bit, he suddenly becomes a different player. I think he's a little bit overweight. I think he's not been 100% fit for a while. And the system that Chelsea have been employing doesn't suit Lukaku. If that makes sense. But it worked at Everton. It worked at Man United. Didn't work at Chelsea. And there are reasons for that. There are multiple reasons for that. For whatever reason, it's worked at the other clubs he's been at. It hasn't worked at Chelsea. Now, is that the style of football they're playing? Is that the coaching? Is that the lifestyle? Is there too many distractions in London? Probably. Well, most big cities there's distractions, but there's various things going on. Obviously, does he have a good relationship with the club? He's re-signed. He's signed there 3 times. So obviously there is a relationship with people at the club and players at the club, his team. But it worked well at Everton and it worked reasonably well at United. He had a decent spell at United. So he's had a decent spell at Inter. Obviously, it wasn't working for whatever reason at Chelsea. And in fact, as time went on, he became less happy in his spells at Chelsea. So questions we have to ask a few questions like, is this really a good fit? And sometimes you may have a great relationship with the chairman, the board, the backroom staff, and it just doesn't work on the field. It's like managers as well. Like a good manager, a really good club, bad fit. Like wrong manager, wrong club. It just doesn't work. Whereas at another club, the manager's having a fantastic time, and the club with a different manager have a fantastic time. And when you get those two together, sometimes it just doesn't work. It's the philosophy, it's the culture, it's the style. We've seen it with so many players who've had fantastic careers at other teams, and they go to this one team like Jaromir Jagr at the Washington Capitals. Did not work. my favourite ice hockey. It's my favourite NHL jersey is that Screaming Eagle, but Yager at the Capitals at that time did not work. It was a bad fit. Superstar player, brilliant team with a brilliant culture, doesn't work. So it does happen. It does happen where you have that brilliant, world class individual talent you want to bring to your team, bring him into the team, it doesn't work. Another good example I could use, I'm having to think on this one a little bit. Jared Hayne of the Gold Coast Titans in 2016, absolute disaster. Following year, gets the coach sacked. Did not work. Yeah, well, you could say that. AC and Inter are two fantastic clubs. In fact, there's a lot of fantastic Italian clubs with some great history. And Juventus are like Man United. They've been a very dominant team for a long time, and now the dominance is over. And they have to. Unfortunately, the issue with Man United and the issue with Juventus is the owners and the powers that be don't want to do like a rebuild where they take a season or two just out of Europe and take a step back and rejuvenate their squad with good youth talent and a good some good scouting in the transfer market. They're not patient. It's always a win now mentality, and that's what's costing Man United. That's what's costing Juventus. Is they're not prepared to take a season or two just to take a step back, reduce the expectations, and properly refresh the squad. They're always in that. It's like the same with Chelsea, win now mentality, and you cannot win every trophy every season. And Chelsea, I think, are also sort of they've got new ownership now, so that may change things. But Chelsea, the last couple of seasons, haven't won silverware. Man United haven't won silverware for a while. Arsenal, they were very dominant clubs for a very long period of time, and they're not designed for that couple of seasons. Let's refresh the squad and rebuild. It's always a win now kind of. Got to win every season, and then Liverpool in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, or 60s, 70s and 80s. Suddenly, 1992 comes along, and they don't win the league for another 30 years. You know, Liverpool were a great side, and then the 90s come along, and they just stopped winning catastrophically. And then they had that long league winning. They didn't win the league for 30 years because they just didn't get their squad management right, and it cost them. Man United, Ferguson era, that ends, and the success is dried up. They're turning into Liverpool with the 90s and the 2000s. Is Man United is now what Liverpool were 20 years ago, living on past glories, and they can't get that next major trophy. Chelsea could end up like that as well. They've had a very dominant spell over the last 20 years. They could also end up like Liverpool, Man United, when they have their wilderness years, when they don't win anything. Several clubs have gone through this. Every club goes through a lean spell, just some of them a bit more lean than others. And some clubs are unfortunately in the win now mode constantly, and it catches up to them. It's the name of the team. The city is Turin. Their biggest rivals, ironically, are Torino, who are got the bigger fan base in Turin. Juventus has got the biggest fan base in Italy, but Torino have the biggest fan base in the city of Turin. And they're not the only club to have Juventus or a similar play on that name. Juve, or you've got a couple of Juve style club names, and they all play in similar colour schemes of black and white. Anyway, I've been going for 3 hours now. I'm going to call it an evening. Thank you very much for your questions. That is not a stupid question. If you're not familiar with Italian geography, Juventus is just the name of the team, but they play in Turin or Torino, and their biggest rivals are actually Torino in the city of Turin. Other clubs like Lazio is a region of Italy, of which Rome is the main city in the Lazio region historically, which is why Lazio play in blue with the Lazio state flag on it, the regional flag, whereas Rome have the coat of arms of the city as their coat of arms and their logo. AC Milan and Internazionale Inter Milan is not technically their name; it's Internazionale. Um, and then Udinese is Udine, like Bolognese. So of Udine is how you would describe that. And then you've got various clubs. You've got Sampdoria, who are from Genova, and then you've got Genova. You've got Bologna, you've got Modena. There's loads of cool Italian club names. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys all very very soon. Unfortunately, I've got a funeral to go to tomorrow in the morning, but in the afternoon I'll be back doing some video content and maybe another live stream. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.